The main character picks up a large red tomato and is delighted by its rich color, but immediately sadly notices that it is too sour. The guy thinks that next time he needs to achieve a sweeter harvest. Suddenly, someone turns to him. A beautiful girl with cute ears and a tail calls him Mr. Isagi and says that everyone else is here and they are waiting only for him. She holds a basket with red and big tomatoes in her right hand. He turns his head in her direction and looks at her. The guy agrees with her and says that he will come now. Isagi thinks to himself with enthusiasm that he wants to achieve a better life in this life. Empire of Remorus. Castle of Remorus. The corridors of the castle are lined with many different knights in beautiful armor. A man addresses the boy by name. He says that from today on he is removing him from the position of court alchemist. The protagonist's eyes widen in surprise and he looks at the man, wondering. Isagi asks him in bewilderment why he decided so. The guy thinks that he copes well with the duties of the court alchemist. The man is very surprised that he asks about this. He says that the main duty of the court alchemist is to make magical weapons for military purposes. The young man looks at him with a startled look. The man says the boy neglects his work duties and does nothing but dig in the ground. He looks at the scroll in his hands with an indifferent look. This man is the head of the Imperial alchemy department, Garius. The boy does not want to agree with him and says that this is not a company in the ground. Isagi pulls his right hand into the sleeve of his kaftan. The head of the Imperial alchemy department looks at his actions. The guy takes out a small bag and holds it in his hand. He insistently asks him to look at it and says that he uses alchemy to breed agricultural crops. He points to the bags in his hand with excitement in his voice and an angry face, and says that he grows varieties that can grow even in completely barren land. The man says with indifference in his voice that this is nonsense, and if there is not enough food, then it should simply be taken away by force. The man supports his chin with one hand and stretches the other forward. He thinks this method is more effective. The boy is shaking with anger and is squeezing his left hand, which holds a bag of seeds, with all his might. He is thinking that he is fed up with everything. The Remorus Empire is a militaristic state that became a great power through aggression and conquest, so they invest a large amount of human capital into military affairs. However, he believes that such irresponsible policies make people suffer. He remembers hungry children on the street. To save this country, he wanted to solve the food problem with alchemy. The head of the Imperial alchemy department rises abruptly from his seat and, leaning his hands on the table, says that he had been shirking his work and cultivating the fields within the castle walls, but that this wayward behavior has come to an end. Isagi asks if he has been removed from his position. The young man thinks to himself that he has been fulfilling his quota, but he understands that he is an ordinary guy from an orphanage, so the man looks down on him. Isagi still believes that he was just doing what he had to do. He believes that alchemy does not exist to kill people and can be used to make people happy. Isagi looks at his now former boss with incredible fury in his eyes. Garius turns halfway to him and says that he is free. The man turns his whole body and looks at the young man standing in front of him with indifference in his eyes. He says that alchemists must obey silently. The guy looks at him with disdain in his eyes and thinks that the head of the department thinks of alchemists only as tools. He says reservedly that he understood him and the order is accepted. The main character walks through an empty city among many different houses and enters a building with a sign on it that says that this is Isagi's workshop. He takes off his outer garment near the door. The same girl again addresses him as Mr. Isagi and greets him, wishing him good morning. A cute girl with ears and a ponytail at the back asks him how his day was. She has a cute smile on her face and is holding a wooden tray with a cloth in her hands. The girl is a maid from the beast race. Her name is Mercia. Isagi looks at her with sadness in his eyes and walks into the room, throwing his jacket over his right arm. He is surprised that she has already arrived. Mercia is a court servant. In between jobs, she helps him in this workshop. The guy remembers their time together. In order to create crops that grow on depleted soil, they conducted research here together. The protagonist sadly sits down on a chair and exhales. The girl notices his condition and is perplexed by it. She makes a suggestion with concern in her voice that something is bothering him and looks at him with worry in her eyes. The girl asks what happened. The main character sullenly remains silent. He begins to explain the whole situation to her in a sad tone, telling her what really happened. Mercia exclaims very loudly and in surprise. She wonders how this is possible. She gets very angry and says that Mr. Isagi worked for the good of the Empire. The girl cannot accept this, and out of anger, she squeezes the piece of paper very tightly in her right hand and leans her other hand on the table. The guy is confused by her overreaction to what is happening and tries to calm her down by putting his hands forward in a conciliatory gesture. Mercia is still furious and asks him if he is angry. The main character says in a calm voice that he would be lying if he said that he was not angry, but it was enough for him that she recognized him. He also says that it's good on the other hand. Mercia looks at him with surprise in her eyes. The protagonist sincerely thanks her for worrying about him so much. He is an orphan, so he was alone for a long time. The guy, smiling, puts his hand down on her chest and says that he is glad that she became his friend. The girl blushes a little and addresses him by name. She asks him with excitement in her voice what he will do now. The guy scratches his cheek with the index finger of his left hand in bewilderment and tells her hesitantly that he did not expect to be fired, so he has not yet come up with anything. The protagonist touches his chin with 2 fingers in a thoughtful gesture and wonders if they will be happy to see him again in the orphanage and if he will be able to work and live there. The girl looks at him. Her face turns red and she folds her arms across her chest, asking herself what to do. Suddenly, an idea comes to the girl's head, and she, with uncertainty in her voice, suggests that he go to her homeland. The protagonist turns his head in her direction in surprise. He looks at her in bewilderment and exclaims questioningly, not understanding what she meant. Mercia blushes very much and puts her hands forward, saying that she doesn't mean anything like that. The girl explains to him that she is only offering him a change of scenery. Her ears droop and her tail stands on end from her owner's emotions. Isagi frowns slightly as he considers her words. He places his hand to his chin and considers her suggestion that they go to her homeland for a change of scenery. The protagonist says that as far as he remembers, her homeland is the Beast Kingdom. He imagines a map of the Remuris Empire and the Beast Kingdom, where 80% of the population are beastmen. The girl confirms his words and says that it is just a village on the outskirts. Isagi says he is glad that she invited him, but he wonders with an uncertain look whether he will be useful. Mercia suddenly jumps closer to him and exclaims, answering his question positively without hesitation. She puts her arms across her chest in a serious tone and frowns a little, saying that if they have an alchemist like him with them, things will get a lot better. The guy looks at her in surprise, amazed by her words, and addresses her by name. Mercia says that although their village is well endowed with natural resources, the food situation is getting worse every year. She remembers her homeland, the forests, mountains, and animals that live there. The guy says that when she first wanted to help him with his research, she said she wanted to make life easier for everyone by creating crops that would help grow even in poor soil. The protagonist remembers that he promised that as soon as he finished working on these seeds, he would send them to the homeland of Mercia. The guy looks thoughtfully at the bag of seeds, which lies on the table near him. Isagi realizes that he just recently finished working on this culture and managed to collect a lot of data. The protagonist cups his hands around his mouth and thinks about it with a concentrated expression. The girl looks at him in bewilderment. The boy touches his chin with his hand and frowns as he thinks about making it so that it can easily grow on every plot of land. The protagonist says abruptly that he understands. Mercia looks at him in surprise. The guy grabs a bag from the table and turns his head sharply towards the girl standing next to her. He looks at her with a confident look and frowning eyebrows, saying that he will go to her homeland. The main character spreads his arms in delight and looks at the girl with determination in his eyes. He says that maybe they will be able to use the cultures they have developed. And then he looks at her with a smile on his face and plans that if they can achieve abundance in food, they should be able to spread their success all over the world. The girl moves closer to him and answers him with the same smile, sincerely thanking him. However, after a second, her smile disappears from her face, and she remains silent with anxiety for a while, and then asks him if he is really sure of this. The protagonist looks at her questioningly, not understanding what she is talking about. The girl clasps her hand in confusion and covers her mouth. She looks away and says that she thinks that with his abilities and the varieties he brought in, he could be useful in any country. He looks at her in bewilderment and reminds her that she invited him herself. The girl blushes a little and apologizes to him for her proposal, which was made only a short time ago. She covers her mouth with her hand and tells him that she said it in a fit of enthusiasm. The guy says that it is better to accept help from a neighbor than to be tied hand and foot without the ability to do anything. He extends his hand to her. The guy believes that by acting freely, they should be able to change the empire. The protagonist puts his right hand to his chest with a smile on his face. Isagi tells her that she helped him not only in his research, but also always supported him, so as a thank you, he wants to help her. He asks if he can't do it. Small drops of tears appear in Mercia's eyes, and she wipes them away with her left hand. The protagonist says that in that case, he will pack his things and go to the kingdom of animals. The girl agrees with him with a smile on her face. She, blushing a little, says that in that case, she will also quit and come. He, with a smile on his face, takes out his large bag, begins to pack his things, and agrees with her, saying that they will see each other later. The girl is about to leave, humming a melody under her breath. Suddenly, the young man begins to understand her words, and he freezes, looking at her in bewilderment. Isagi suddenly runs out of his own workshop, shouts at the girl, and asks her to wait. The girl, who has already gone out into the city street, turns around at his voice and asks herself a question in bewilderment. The protagonist does not believe that she is going to quit and go with him. Mercia confirms her words and says that she cannot leave him alone. The protagonist asks her with concern if she is sure that she wants to quit her job. He believes that the job at the palace is elite and the salary is not small. The girl smiles at him. Her face turns a little red and she touches her chin with her palm. Mercia, with a kind smile on her face and slightly closed eyes, says that now he worries about her, as she did about him recently. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief, looking at her. He offers Mercia to go together in that case. The girl agrees to his offer without a doubt. A few days later, the heroes are about to leave the city, passing through the gates, through which a carriage with a coachman passes. The girl suggests that he go quietly, and asks if he needs anything else. Isagi agrees with her. The main character looks forward with a slight smile on his face and says in a calm voice that he put both water and food in the magic bag, so there are no problems. The girl holds the straps of a very large backpack behind her back and looks with displeasure at the magical backpack-shaped thing created with alchemy. It can hold more things than it seems. Mercia looks at him and says that it will take about a month to get to the Beast Kingdom. They have a long and difficult journey ahead of them, but she suggests that they enjoy theirs. The guy looks at the castle visible from behind the walls with a sad look and agrees with her. Isagi looks at the scenery outside the round window with a smile on her face, her mouth hanging open in surprise. The girl smiles too, looking in the same direction. Two men are riding next to them, one of whom is reading a book, holding it in his hand. They take place on September 12th and September 17th. They are walking around the city. The main character looks at the girl and points her forward with his index finger to a large tower in front of them. On September 28th, they make a camp in the countryside and light a small fire next to it. Mercia sits near burning sticks, which are lined with stones, and the Isagi hand her a glass of hot liquid, from which steam comes. On October 7th, they are riding in a carriage on the road again. Mercia tries to wake the boy, calling for him to wake up. Isagi reluctantly opens his eyes when he sees the silhouette of his friend through the darkness. The girl tells the protagonist that they have arrived. Isagi rubs her eyes with her left hand and looks at the landscape outside the window with a sleep-clouded gaze. The protagonist opens his eyes in surprise and says that this is the homeland of Mercia. He looks at the very busy streets, where many beastmen walk. This is the kingdom of beasts, the village of Plummenia. When they are dropped off, the protagonist is very surprised by the large number of beastmen and looks around the streets in bewilderment. Even though they are on the outskirts, this is still the kingdom of beasts. Isagi and Mercia look at the beastmen. They see a muscular bullman, smiling, carrying a bucket of water in his left hand and holding a pole with other buckets of water on his shoulder with his right hand. Behind him, a girl is trying with great tenacity to move a goat and is pulling on a rope that is wrapped around its neck. A little further away from them, a woman is examining a shovel belonging to a merchant. Not far from them, a guy with rabbit ears is holding a cage with a rooster and is surprised to notice them, and next to him, a girl is trying to catch a chicken. Mercia urges him to go to her house. The boy objects to her and asks if they should greet the headman first. He wonders if he should be surprised by the sudden arrival of a man. The girl asks him not to worry, because the head man is her father. She looks at him with a serious face and puts her right hand to her chest. The protagonist, surprised, loudly exclaims inquiringly. He says that she should have told him earlier. Mercia apologizes to him with a smile on her face and closing her eyes, saying that she wanted to surprise him, so she kept quiet. The boy asks what he should do and says that he is nervous now. Isagi worries that he will tell them that he does not need any alchemists. The girl calms him down and says that everything is fine. Mercia, with a serious face, clenches her fist in anger and says that if he says such things, she will hit him, teach him a lesson, so to speak. The protagonist behind her is perplexed and wonders if she just said that she will hit him. The girl waves her hand towards her house and calls Isagi to come here. He follows her. After a while, they come to a large house. The girl says that they are there, and this is her house. Mercia turns to him before entering and says that she will talk to her father and mother first. The protagonist agrees with her and says that he understands her. The girl touches the door handle. Suddenly, a smiling woman jumps out at her, happy about her return. She says that Mercia has returned. The girl calls the woman mom and asks her not to jump out because she scared her. The guy watches this with surprise. The protagonist is very surprised when he enters Mercia's house. He sees a very angry man in front of him, who looks at him with an unkind look. Isagi understands that this man is Mercia's father. He feels that hostility emanates from him. The man invites him to sit on the bench opposite him and his wife, next to Mercia. Isagi thanks him politely and sincerely apologizes for disturbing him. The protagonist hesitantly, stuttering a little, says that he is glad to meet them. The guy explains to them that he came from the Remuris Empire and introduces himself as the alchemist Isagi. Suddenly, Mercia's father interrupts him and shouts at him to shut up. The boy is frightened by this and looks at him in surprise. The man angrily says that he is not going to give his daughter to some man of dubious origin. The protagonist arrives in confusion and exclaims questioningly, not understanding what he is talking about. The village elder again angrily yells at the guy. He says that Mercia is his precious daughter, and he is just a person who appeared. Suddenly, Mercia's mother interrupts him and says with a smile on her face that she likes him quite well. Her husband stops shouting and exclaims questioningly, looking at his wife with bewilderment. The protagonist is embarrassed by this situation and asks them for forgiveness. Mercia's mother says that she has finally brought a man into the house. The woman assumes that she must have already decided everything. Suddenly, Mercia herself jumps up from her seat. Everyone is very surprised by her behavior. The girl blushes very much, grabbing the hem of her dress, and screams that everything is wrong and she wanted to introduce Isagi as a new resident of their village. Her father is very surprised, looking at his trembling daughter and the guy next to her. The wife next to him smiles awkwardly at them. The man blushes a little and asks to start again. He introduces himself as the head of this village, Kelsey. The elder asks him if he wants to move to their village. Isagi smiles good-naturedly and answers positively. He says that he would like them to allow him to carry out his alchemist activities in their village. Mercia's parents are silent, not understanding what he said. His father's mouth opens slightly, and his mother frowns. The boy looks at them with concern, not understanding what happened. Mercia looks at Isagi and assumes that her father and mother do not know what alchemy is. The boy looks at her in surprise. The man scratches his head and says that he is ashamed to admit it, but it is true. Now everything becomes clear to Isagi. He asks if they have ever met alchemists. The girl explains to him that alchemists are rare in these parts. In this case, the main character wants to explain who alchemists are first. He explains to them with a smile on his face that alchemists are people who control matter with the help of magical power. They can process and qualitatively change the structure of materials using magic. He thinks that it is difficult to make something that differs greatly in quality from the original material, but it is an extremely practical art. The girl's parents frown and remain silent, considering his words. The girl suggests that it is too complicated for them to understand, and thinks that it would be faster to demonstrate alchemy in practice. The guy looks at her and says that she is right. The protagonist approaches Kelsey and asks him if he can borrow his sword on his belt. The man looks at his weapon and answers positively. The guy examines the man's weapon very closely. Kelsey asks him what he thinks and says it's a fine piece of manatite he bought the other day. The guy says there's no manatite in that dagger. The man exclaims angrily, asking him again. The protagonist says that alchemists are endowed with the ability to see through the true nature of materials. This is a low-quality metal similar to manatite, namatite. The girl imagines in her head a merchant who sells counterfeit weapons and lies that they contain magical power. The man gets very upset and says that it costs 20 silver coins. The guy takes off his gloves, continue holding the sword. He says with confidence in his voice that everything is fine and he will be able to remake it into a dagger from real manatite. Mercia's mother asks him again in surprise, thinking. Mercia's father is surprised that he would transform the sword into a precious material and asks how he would do it. The protagonist takes the sword in his hands, and a magic circle appears around it. The weapon begins to glow. The girl's parents are surprised by this and look at these actions of the protagonist in amazement. The guy thinks that first he needs to change the shape and weight of the dagger. He concentrates on changing it and its structure, performing numerous different manipulations with magic. The main character, with a sincere smile on his face, hands his friend's parents the dagger he had modified with magic and says that everything is ready. The man takes the weapon in his hands and, looking at the guy with surprise in his eyes, asks if this is a dagger made of real manatite. Isagi asks him to send a stream of magical power through it to check. He exclaims in surprise. Kelsey runs a stream of magical power through the new weapon, and her mouth drops open and her eyes wide in surprise. The man is very surprised by this, looking at the dagger. He notices a target on the wall that hangs behind the main character, and with all his strength, in one quick and deft movement, throws his new weapon at the target, saying that he wants to test it. The dagger successfully accomplishes its task, but to the village elder's surprise, it tears apart the target and makes a hole in the wall. The man looks out the window and exclaims in surprise, noticing the dagger stuck in the ground outside. Kelsey blushes a little and says with a smile on her face that it's cool. Behind him, his wife grabs his shoulder with her left hand and with a fake smile on her face asks him what he's doing. The man turns to his wife and is a little scared of her. He mumbles in fear and says that he didn't think he was that powerful. The woman gives off a scary aura, and the woman cracks her fists, telling him not to make excuses. Kelsey asks her for forgiveness. The protagonist is horrified and a little confused. He apologizes to them and says that he should have warned them first. The guy won't be able to fix something like that quickly. Isagi takes out a piece of wood from behind his backpack. After a while, the wall is completely intact, like a target hanging in the same place. The girl says that it's cool, and the main character thanks her. The guy uses magic to detach a piece of wood from the log. He says that alchemists are capable of this, and what he wants most is to farm using alchemy. The man looks at him seriously and says that unfortunately, this land is barren, and there is no point in farming here. The protagonist looks at him in surprise and says that he knows. Isagi says that this is the reason why the mountain and forest resources are also decreasing. The man is puzzled and asks him why he came all the way here knowing this. The protagonist looks at the village chief with determination. He puts his left hand to his chest and says with enthusiasm that he came here because he wants to improve the food situation with the help of alchemy. Kelsey puts her hand to her chin, puzzled, and looks at him seriously. The boy explains that he heard from Mercia about the village's situation and that he wants to make farming possible on the poor soil using varieties improved by alchemy. Isagi says that he also wants to reduce the number of starving people, even if only by one. The man ponders his words. Suddenly, the girl stands up. Mercia says that if everything is left as is, the wealth of the mountains and forests will only decrease. The girl looks at her parents with a determined look and asks them in a loud voice, for the sake of the future of the village, to allow her to take up farming using Lord Isagi's alchemy. Kelsey closes her eyes and smiles a little. The man says it's not that he believes it, but he assumes he has a chance. The village elder looks at his smiling wife and says he'll give him permission. The protagonist is very surprised and confused. He opens his mouth wide from shock. Mercia smiles gratefully next to him. They both sincerely thank Mercia's parents. The man looks at his wife, who is writing something on a scroll, and says that Isagi needs his own house. They are going to give him a house with a large area. The woman hands the scroll to her daughter. She tells Mercia to take Isagi to a free house. The girl says that she understands and accepts the scroll. She turns to the guy and with a smile on her face calls him to come with her. In the palace he felt constrained, but here he can do what he wants, completely devoting himself to his favorite business. Mercia and Isagi are walking down the street, but a girl is watching them from around the corner. She understands who it is. The main character and the girl next to him walk forward. They pass the outskirts of the village and move towards the forest. The guy thinks that with alchemy, he will make life in this village beautiful. They walk along a forest path, and the girl says that his home is here. They make their way through the trees, and the guy thinks that his new life also begins here. He looks ahead at his new home with anticipation in his eyes. However, in front of the girl and the boy, there is a small old house, which is missing part of the roof. They look at the building with incomprehension in their eyes. Mercia, who holds the paper in front of her, opens her mouth in surprise and frowns as she looks at the building in front of them. Isagi, however, is confused and asks if this is his new home. The girl says that it is a shabby, dilapidated house. She gives off a very sinister aura. She clutches a piece of paper in her hands in rage and is angry that he is going to force Mr. Isagi to live in such a terrible house. The protagonist behind her looks at the girl in bewilderment, a little scared of her. Suddenly, he remembers the man's words that the house is a little old. The guy says the Kelsey warned him. Mercia turns around and screams that she can't allow this. She clenches her fists in rage and wants to go and tell him everything. Isagi puts both hands forward in a conciliatory gesture and says that everything is fine. The girl turns to him and expresses her disagreement with him. Her gaze is very determined, and her eyebrows are slightly furrowed. She blushes a little when she looks at the young man. Isagi clenches his left hand into a fist and exclaims that if a house is not fit for habitation, it would be better to rebuild it. He explains to her that this is exactly how an alchemist thinks. The guy also says with a smile on his face that he has always wanted to try to build a dream house. The girl asks him again about the dream house with surprise in her voice. When the main character was a court alchemist, he was treated badly because he was a simple man from an orphanage. He assumes that this is why he lived in a studio that looked like a large warehouse. The main character looks at the house with a smile on his face and says that he will try to build something that he likes. The girl lowers her hands and agrees with him with a little sadness in her voice. The protagonist touches the wood of the house with his gloved palm. He wonders if it really can't be used if it's so dilapidated. The girl watches his actions closely. He starts to take off his gloves. The guy wants to tear down this house first. He looks at the dilapidated building with determination and a smile on his face, frowning slightly. Isagi directs a stream of magic. A magic circle appears around his palm, with the help of which he is going to influence the tree. The guy changes the quality of the wood, and in a moment it begins to crack and shake in different directions. Eventually the building collapses completely, and only various sticks remain. The girl behind him watches this. The guy wipes his forehead from fatigue and smiles. The girl looks at this in bewilderment. She takes a couple of boards and throws them over her shoulder, holding them with her hand. Mercia looks at him with a smile on her face, and tells him that she will put the scattered boards aside. The boy thanks her with surprise in his voice, but thinks to himself, a little perplexed, that these boards must be quite heavy. He crouches down and rummages through his bag. The protagonist explains that he wants to get rid of weeds to prepare the plot. He feels something in his bag and says that this is it. The guy takes out a hybrid herbicide. Isagi qualitatively changed the composition of the product using alchemy. He significantly strengthened and accelerated its action. The protagonist begins to spray it on the grass on his plot. The main character says with enthusiasm in his voice that everything is fine and encourages himself and the girl to start building the house. Mercia looks at him and wipes her face with her left hand from fatigue. The protagonist takes out a large wooden stick from his magic backpack and looks at it intently, frowning slightly. The girl next to him takes out another stick from his magic backpack. She exclaims his name in surprise and looks at him with worry as Isagi falls to the ground under the weight of the stick, exclaiming loudly in surprise. They take out the ent wood that he managed to get from the plant monster. The protagonist uses his alchemy by touching the tree, and a magic circle appears around his hand. Through magic, he increases its durability. Isagi uses floating levitation magic to lift many different sticks into the air. He directs various wood in a certain direction with his hands, focusing his gaze. The guy, controlling various sticks of wood, begins to build the foundation of his new dream house. The girl standing next to him watches this with a surprised look in her eyes, her mouth slightly open in shock. The guy thinks that no one is limiting him anymore. With a focused look in his eyes and a furrowed brow, he continues to build his own dream home with the help of magic. This time, he builds the walls and windows and begins to build the roof. He even has an ideal building plan in his head, which he happily brings to life. He has already built the doors. All he has to do is implement the plan. In the end, he completes his construction by laying the roof of the house. Isagi says with joy in his voice that everything is ready, and looks at his new beautiful house, spreading both hands to the sides. His girlfriend, who is standing not far from him, also looks at his new house. The protagonist shields his eyes from the sun with his right hand to better examine the building in front of him, and puts his left hand on his side. The girl folds her arms across her chest and says with admiration in her eyes that it is excellent. They take off their shoes and go into the main character's new building. The guy is a little shy and asks her if he overdid it. The girl covers her mouth with her hand in surprise and admiration and blushes a little. Mercia turns to him and says with a smile on her face that she now understands what his dream house looks like. The girl touches the tables in the kitchen, and the protagonist happily watches her. The guy goes up to the second floor by the stairs, showing it to the girl. She watches him in surprise. They even find a bathroom in his new house. The protagonist says that he will probably slowly arrange a normal workplace later. Isagi asks the girl for help in arranging his furniture around the house. Mercia, with a smile on her face, closes her eyes and asks him to rely on her. The protagonist takes one chair out of his bag with disappointment and realizes that this is all they brought with them. The guy sighs a little upset and puts the chair next to the table. He says that if you look at it like that, it's as if they didn't bring any furniture at all. The girl, with a smile on her face, says that she thinks that nothing can be done because there was not enough room in that warehouse. The guy, with disappointment, remembers his previous place of work, littered with papers, and agrees with the girl's words. Suddenly, the girl's ear twitches and she hears someone calling her and asking if she is there. Mercia quickly runs out of the house and is surprised to discover that the one who called her is her mother. The woman looks ahead in surprise and opens her mouth, covering it with her hand. She turns to her daughter and asks if there was such a wonderful house in their village. Mercia explains to her that Isagi remade it with alchemy to make it more comfortable to live in. Her mother is surprised to hear her say that he remade the house, and says that alchemy is really cool. The protagonist is a little embarrassed and scratches his head with his right hand, throwing it back. He apologizes for the fact that I will change everything here, at my own discretion. The woman puts her hands forward in a conciliatory gesture, and, smiling, says that everything is fine. She apologizes to him for showing up so suddenly. The woman stands in the doorway and says she wants to help clean up so he can live here right away. But she realizes with embarrassment that it seems there is no need. The guy says that he is very pleased with her concern. The woman, with a smile on her face, asks if she can see the house from the inside. He also smiles back at her and answers positively, inviting her into the house. The woman exclaims in surprise and delight as she walks into the house that the boy had built some time ago. Mercia's mother runs her hand over the table and says that the house is stunning, and also notes the spacious kitchen. Her daughter watches her with peace, and the protagonist is silent. He suddenly points to the kitchen shelf behind the girl and addresses her, suggesting that this shelf is too high for her. She turns to him in surprise. Mercia stands on her toes. The girl, with a concentrated face, stretches her right hand up, trying to reach the shelf. Mercia says with confidence that she will reach it if she stretches. The guy behind her is a little confused and says he's going to make her shorter. He's about to use alchemy, and a magic circle appears around his hand. The girl reaches out and grabs the door handle. The woman asks if it is beautiful and says that if all the utensils are put out, this kitchen will be even more beautiful than theirs. The girls next to her come up with an idea. Isagi, not far from them, is embarrassed and scratches her head, throwing back her hand. Mercia suddenly exclaims loudly, turning to her mother, and puts both hands together in a pleading gesture. The girl asks her if they have furniture and household items that they do not use, and if they can move them here. Sometime later, Mercia puts her hands on her hips and stands in the middle of the main character's furnished kitchen. The girl says that it is cozy here now. The guy opens his mouth in surprise. The main character, with delight in his eyes, says that it's cool and thanks her because it has become more like home. The girl looks away from him and says reservedly that she is glad. Mercia thoughtfully continues to look at the room and says that the walls still seem empty and she wants to hang something on them. The girl also thinks that she wants to put some kind of vase on the table. The guy looks at her with surprise and bewilderment in his eyes. The girl tilts her head to the side a little and, closing her eyes with a smile on her face, offers him to have dinner for now. The girl takes out a large cauldron and puts it on the table, having laid a napkin before. Mercia explains to him that their mother gave them a tasty dish, so they can eat now. The young man remembers her. The girl opens the lid of the cauldron with a smile on her face. The main character looks at the dish with a startled look and opens his eyes wide in surprise and opens his mouth. He exclaims in admiration and says that it looks delicious. The guy realizes that it is milk soup and thinks that it is wonderful. The girl apologizes to him for the modest dish. Isagi calms her down and says with a smile on her face that she wanted to eat something like that. The girl thanks him. Mercia pours one portion. On the tray on the table is soup, a special dish of sienna, a milky soup of mountain herbs and mushrooms, and next to it is bread from the magic bag. The protagonist, with a smile on his face, is about to start eating the milk soup and takes a spoon in his hand. The girl remains, standing behind him, and wishes him a pleasant appetite. Isagi turns around and looks at her in bewilderment. Isagi turns to the girl and asks with concern on his face if she will eat with him. Mercia blushes very much from the words of the main character, and her tail rises in smoke. The girl turns away from him and screams that she is a servant and cannot eat at the same table with him. The guy looks at her in bewilderment. He explains to her that they are no longer in the castle and no one will scold her. The girl looks at him with big eyes in surprise and asks if she can really join in. The main character turns to her and offers to eat together. The girl clasps her hands along her body and tilts her head slightly to the side. Her face turns red and she smiles and thanks him for letting her join him. Mercia and Isagi are sitting at a set table with milk soup and bread on it. The protagonist laughs and says with a smile on his face that she is sitting opposite him in an unusual way. The girl, all covered in paint, tells him that she feels the same way. She says that for some reason she can't calm down unless he's there. The guy says that's not surprising and encourages her to try to suppress the feeling. He thanks her again for the food. The girl accepts the thanks. The protagonist brings the spoon to his mouth and first blows on it a little to cool the milk soup, and then puts the spoon in his mouth. Isagi's eyes widen in amazement, and she says with admiration that it's delicious. The guy shares his impressions of the dish, and says that the sweetness of milk is revealed in the mouth. He asks Mercia what the plant on his spoon is called. She explains that it is kirkuk grass. It often grows in the surrounding forests. It is a wild plant. The girl also thinks that it is really very tasty. The protagonist thinks that the stem is crispy and the boiled leaves are soft. He imagines this grass and makes the assumption that it is probably tasty both boiled and fried. He also pays attention to the taste of mushrooms and the salty taste of bacon, which combine perfectly with the delicate sweetness of milk. He feels all the products and imagines them. The guy bites off a piece of bread with pleasure and dips it into the milk soup. He thinks about the bread, which has fully absorbed all this, has become soft and easy to eat. The girl looks at the happy guy gobbling up his lunch with a smile on her face and feels relieved. The main character says that he is full, leaving an empty plate behind him. The girl says she is glad that he liked it. She collects all the dishes from the table and puts them on one tray, taking them away. Mercia, with a smile on her face, says that she will wash the dishes herself. The guy dissuades her and says that it is not necessary, and that he will clean everything himself. The young man thinks that it is better for her to return home, since she returned to her homeland after so much time. The girl holds a dirty dish under her nose and says with a serious face that she will stay. The guy looks at her with surprise in his eyes and is amazed by her words, exclaiming questioningly. He asks if she wants to stay here for the night. The girl says that she is going to live here and serve him. She puts her hands on the table and looks at him. The protagonist is very surprised by her words, and a blush appears on his face. He asks her to wait with excitement in his voice and puts his hands forward in a conciliatory gesture. The guy asks her if she understands that this is not the Imperial Palace, and he is no longer a court alchemist. She answers positively. Mercia folds her arms across her chest and says with confidence in her voice that she is ready to serve him as long as his heart desires. She cannot be persuaded. The protagonist opens his mouth in surprise and looks at her in amazement. Isagi frantically tries to think of something to convince the girl, and hesitantly says that he needs to make a bedroom for her and he won't be able to build it now. She says that her things are already in a free room on the second floor. She points with her hands at her things that are already in the room. The main character says that she works quickly, as always. However, the guy does not stop his hesitant attempts to love his girlfriend. Mercia looks at him with a sad look and asks him if she can do it. The guy resigns himself and exhales tiredly. He says that he will be glad and her help will be useful. The girl, with a smile on her face and delight in her voice, asks him if it is true. Isagi frowns a little and suggests that she tell her parents because they will worry, especially Kelsey. The protagonist remembers the evil village chief who shouted that he would not allow this. The girl is at a loss. She trembles a little and hesitantly says that she has permission from her mother. The guy is confused and asks her again about her mother. He understands what she means. Somewhere not far from the main character's house in a village where night has already fallen, a very angry village elder calls his daughter by name in a loud, furious voice. He clenches his left fist with force and fury and demands that she return home, shouting that he will not allow her to live with Isagi. The guy is embarrassed by this, and the girl is perplexed. After some time, the next day, the girl lightly knocks on the door of the main character's house, which she recently built with the help of alchemy. The guy looks at the girl with a worried expression and wishes her good morning, addressing her by name. He asks if she discussed everything properly with Kelsey yesterday. The girl looks sad and clutches the hem of her dress. Her ears are down, and she is silent. Mercia regretfully says that she did not receive permission from her father, and she will have to come from home every morning to help him. The protagonist understands her. The girl asks him for forgiveness in a very sad voice. Isagi thinks that she is his precious daughter, and this is natural. The alchemist remembers how the village chief was very angry and demanded that she return, clenching his fist in anger. The young man assumes that they managed to have a proper conversation. He looks at his dejected girlfriend and tells the girl that it is quite enough for him that she will simply come. She turns around and looks at him with a sad look. The girl suddenly approaches him and shouts that she will still persuade her father so that she can live and work in the same house. She puts her hand on her chest and asks for a little time until then. The guy is surprised by her behavior. Isagi says that she doesn't have to try so hard, since it would be sad if she fought. He puts his hands out in a conciliatory gesture and, a little shyly, thinks about how nervous he would be if they suddenly started living together. Mercia is still trying to object to him. The guy scratches his head in confusion, throwing his hand back. Another girl with ears is watching this scene from behind the bushes. She calls Mercia by name. She turns around with a surprised look, wanting to know who called her by name, and Isagi, meanwhile, bends down, looks out from behind Mercia, and wonders who it is, also surprised by the stranger. In front of them appears a young and beautiful girl with cute ears. She puts one hand forward and presses the other to her body and runs towards them. The girl is happy that this is Mercia after all. The girl's mouth drops open in shock, and her eyes widen in surprise at her old acquaintance. Mercia hesitantly exclaims her name and addresses the girl as Naya. She runs up to her and grabs her hands. She says that she heard that she came back and came to meet. Mercia, with a smile on her face, tells her that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The protagonist, who is standing not far from them, watches this. Naya continues to hold Mercia's hands and asks her old friend why she came back so suddenly. The girl wants to explain everything to her, but suddenly Naya notices the guy and looks at him with a surprised look. The girl frowns a little and opens her mouth in surprise, continuing to look at the young man. The guy puts his hand forward and is a little confused by such an insistent look. Naya suddenly gets an idea and exclaims that she understood everything. The girl, blushing a little, puts her finger to her chin and with a sly smile on her face says that she brought her husband. Mercia blushes very much from her friend's words and starts waving her hands in different directions, trying to deny her words. After a while, they explain the whole situation to Naya, and the protagonist says that in other words his name is Isagi and he is an alchemist. The girl repeats his words about how he wants to make this village prosperous with alchemy, and says that it is cool. Nei closes his eyes with a smile on his face and says that he seems like a good person. The girl greets him and extends her hand for a handshake. The guy looks at this in surprise. The girl with the ears introduces herself as Nia. She closes one eye and with a very wide smile on her face, blushing a little, says that she is Mercia's childhood friend. The girl, smiling, squeezes the alchemist's hand tightly and shakes it vigorously in different directions, greeting him. The guy stands in bewilderment at her actions. Mercia watches this with displeasure in her eyes. The protagonist looks at his new friend in amazement, his mouth slightly open, and thinks that she is very hospitable to him, to a human being. He finds it amazing. Naya, with a self-confident look, presses herself against Mercia and, slightly covering her mouth with her hand, asks if she invited him. The girl is very embarrassed and, blushing deeply, answers positively, asking what's wrong with that. The guy watches the confused Mercia and the embarrassing Naya in surprise. He thinks that he thought that he and Mercia didn't have many secrets from each other, but still, the sudden change in her expression reveals that they get along well. The guy looks at the girls standing not far from him, turning their backs to him, and thinks that he would also like to have such a close friend. Mercia is very embarrassed by her friend's words. NEA runs away from them and says that she must go. The girl wishes Isagi that his farm will prosper. She waves her right hand at them, saying goodbye. Mercia also responds in kind and, like Isagi, waves her hand after her. Mercia presses the hem of her dress in embarrassment. A slight blush appears on her face from embarrassment, and she apologizes to the guy, saying that her friend is noisy. The protagonist disagrees with her and says that he is glad that she talked to them. After some time, the main character suggests his girlfriend to start working today. The girl fixes her hair and is surprised that they will already start working. The guy explains to her that he wants to check as soon as possible whether the harvest will come in here. The protagonist thoughtfully rests his palm on his chin and thinks that yesterday he got rid of the weeds in this field when he was building a house, and now he needs to plow the land. The boy exclaims in surprise and turns his head, looking somewhere to the side. Isagi says that there is a stone in the way here. The protagonist wants it to serve as material. The girl silently watches his actions. Isagi touches the boulder with his palm and analyzes the composition of the stone. A magic circle appears around his hand. He changes the shape of the stone with magic and the stone begins to resemble a human silhouette. In the end, a large stone golem appears before the boy and girl. The main character is happy that he succeeded, and Mercia looks at the resulting monster with surprise in her eyes. Isagi holds the magic stone in his hands and looks at it. He thinks about inserting the magic stone, which is the driving force, into his chest. The guy puts the stone in place. The protagonist squeezes his hand in joy and says that the golem is ready. Its eyes begin to glow with a bright light. Isagi turns to the golem and orders it to move forward. It obeys his command and takes a step. Mercia looks at this in surprise. The protagonist orders the stone golem to plow the earth, and in order for it to hear him, he puts his hands to his mouth, thereby increasing the sound. The golem again obeys his order and plows the earth with the help of 2 hoes. Isagi puts his hand to his forehead to shield his eyes from the sun and see his invention better. He says that there is no problem in the behavior and flow of magical power and is happy about it. The girl who stands next to him, with a smile on her face, says that this is expected from the golem he created. She says that she is going to spray the herbicide over a wide area. Suddenly, the village chief's voice is heard from behind the nearby bushes. The man loudly calls the young man by name and asks what it is. Mercia frowns a little when she hears her father's voice. She doesn't even turn around to look at him, as she is still angry, and the main character looks at the head of the village, who is amazed by what he saw as a golem, with surprise and unexpectedness addressing him by name. Isagi explains to him that it is a golem created by alchemy to help in the field. He explains to him that it will not attack people and tells him not to worry. The man crosses his arms and stutters a little. Kelsey is unsure and says that alchemy is useful. The man thoughtfully touches his chin with his hand and asks the boy if the land can produce crops. The boy looks at him in surprise. Behind them, the golem continues to plow the land. The protagonist says with a smile on his face that the quality of the soil is not much different from the soil in the Empire, so he thinks that everything will grow without problems. Isagi holds the seeds in his hands and says that this is nothing more than a guess. The man frowns slightly and looks away from the protagonist in confusion, saying that if it's true, that's just wonderful. Behind him, his daughter sprays herbicide on the vegetation. The guy thinks about Mercia and is embarrassed to realize that since she doesn't react to Kelsey at all, it means she's angry. The girl continues to do her thing, not wanting to pay attention to her father. The protagonist takes a bag out of his bag and thinks with uncertainty about the tense atmosphere. He says that he will now grow plants and invites the village chief if he wants to come and take a look. The main character says with a smile on his face that if everything goes as it should, then it will be possible to harvest right away. He holds a huge bag in his hands. The elder of the beastman village looks at him questioningly. I don't understand what he's talking about. The man repeats his words to himself that he will be able to harvest immediately and wonders. The guy begins to scatter the contents of the bag and says that first he will scatter specially made fertilizers created by alchemy. The protagonist explains that the raw material is a fertilizer that is commonly used in the Empire, but instead of changing the properties or enhancing it, he personally made it more nutritious. The man looks at him in surprise and bewilderment. The girl understands that her father does not understand anything and remains silent. Mercia gives in and explains to Kelsey that, in short, it is a fertilizer created by an alchemical method in order to strengthen the depleted soil. He looks at her in surprise. The man, perplexed, says that he understands. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief, watching the father and daughter. The girl apologizes to Isagi for making him worry. The guy looks at her with a kind look. He smiles at her and says that he thinks they have an objection to each other. But they get along well because family is irreplaceable. Mercia looks at her father and answers positively, agreeing with the guy's words. The man smiles back at her. The boy changes the subject and, turning his head towards them, calls on them to scatter the fertilizer. The golem has already finished the job and is standing not far from him. The girl, who is standing next to her father, agrees with the main character. They start working. The girl pours out the contents of the bag, and the golem next to her works with a hoe. The protagonist says that the golem will mix the places where the fertilizer is scattered with a hoe and make beds with a shovel. The boy also says that they will plant seeds in places with prepared soil. The village chief addresses Isagi by name and asks if he needs to wait before mixing the soil with fertilizer. The protagonist says that this is usually the case, but since the fertilizer he made also speeds up the rate of decomposition, time is saved and there is no need to mix thoroughly. The man is very surprised by his words. The girl closes her eyes and says with an unperturbed expression that for Mr. Isagi it's a piece of cake. The man behind her smiles uncertainly, and Isagi himself searches for something in his backpack and thinks that the bar seems to have risen. The guy takes a bag out of his backpack and says that first they will plant plants that grow easily even in the wasteland and are close to everyone. When he opens the bag, it contains selectively bred potatoes. The guy leans over the beds he has made and carefully distributes the potatoes into the holes. He says he places the seed potatoes in the hole and covers them with soil using a hoe. Then the boy picks up a bucket of water and says with confidence in his voice that if he waters it, it will grow and should be ready for harvesting. Isagi, with a sharp movement, dumps the water onto the holes. The girl behind him does the same. The man continues to stand his ground and with uncertainty in his voice contradicts the boy, saying that he will not be able to grow up right away. The boy looks at the village chief with a surprised look. He says that potatoes grow quickly, of course, but they need 3 or 4 months. Suddenly, plants begin to appear under his feet, in the holes. The head looks down at his feet in amazement and notices with surprise how the plant grows at a rapid pace. In just a moment, ripe potatoes are visible across the entire field. The man is very surprised and opens his eyes wide and his mouth opens. The girl standing next to him smiles as she watches their work. The potatoes are already fully ripe and ready to be harvested. The protagonist holds an empty bucket in his hands and looks at this picture with satisfaction and rejoices. The man standing behind him is very much shocked by this and cannot come to his senses. The guy turns to him and says that since the stems and leaves have turned yellow, it should be time to harvest. Kelsey still looks at him with great surprise and is amazed by his words. The protagonist grabs one bush and pulls it up with effort. He frowns a little and asks how so, Mercia and her father look at the guy with anticipation and hope and wait for him to pull the bush up. Finally, the main character succeeds, and putting in even more effort, he tears the bush off the ground along with the potato. Isagi smiles with delight and looks at the positive result. He exclaims with joy in his voice that it is a success. The guy holds a vegetable in one hand and rests the other on his side. He says that he had confidence, but he still feels relieved. Mercia is also happy and congratulates him. The man holds another plucked potato bush in his hand and shouts loudly that he cannot believe that it is possible to harvest potatoes on the same day. The guy looks at him. He says his surprise is justified and suggests trying it. The girl suggests trying a simple sauté. Isagi says that since the weather is nice, they can cook it outside. After a while, they set the table. The girl peels the potatoes with a knife and cuts them. The man and the guy behind her sit at the table. The latter takes something out of his backpack again. The village chief asks Izzy what it is and looks at a strange device with a magic circle drawn on top. The guy says that it is a magic device that generates fire. Kelsey repeats his words with surprise. The guy puts his hand to the round switch that is on one side of the device and turns it. Suddenly, a small light appears on the magic circle. He explains that if you press the button like this, a fire will light. The man watches this with amazement and opens his mouth wide in surprise, watching the fire appear out of nowhere. The guy calmly continues to explain that if you adjust the lever, you can change the strength of the fire as you wish. The man with a shocked look and furrowed brows says that he heard that there are convenient things in the city, but a thing that can always easily start a fire is unbelievable. He spreads his arms out to the sides, looking at the device that is on the table. The protagonist watches his great surprise with a calm expression. The village elder asks the young man if he did it himself and addresses Isagi by name. The fire continues to burn. The boy, with a smile on his face, slightly closes his eyes and happily explains to the village chief that this is also the work of an alchemist to make such magical utensils. The man is still amazed by this and looks at him in surprise. The girl starts to cook potatoes in a frying pan, turning up the heat. She looks at the future dish and thinks that she needs to add vegetable oil to the frying pan and fry it on medium heat. She thinks that when the crust turns golden, she should flip it again. Mercia turns the potatoes with a smile on her face, tossing them in the air a couple of times, holding onto the handle of the pan. The girl covers the frying pan with a lid. The protagonist and her father, who are standing next to her and watching the cooking process, are already impatiently waiting for the dish. Kelsey is holding cutlery in her hands, and Isagi is holding an empty plate in her hands. The girl closes her eyes and looks at them with a smile on her face. Mercia thinks about letting it brew for about 4 minutes on low heat. Then she lays out the portions. The girl holds a tray of ready food in her hands and says with joy in her voice and a smile on her face that everything is ready. She has finished cooking the potato sauté, which is already on the set table. The man's mouth waters as he looks at the dish. He sheds a small tear, thinking that it was his daughter who prepared the dish. The girl says that the seasonings are oil, salt and pepper, so she leaves it up to them. The guy puts a piece of potato on his fork and puts it in his mouth, chewing it thoroughly. His eyes widen in surprise. The girl also chews the dish and blushes a little. The main character says with a smile on his face that it is delicious. The man continues to chew the potato sauté thoroughly. The girl sitting opposite the guy says that there are no questions about the taste. The head of the village looks at the resulting dish with surprise and, greatly amazed by the taste of the potatoes, says that it tastes much better than what is grown in their village. The man says that, strangely enough, he seems to be bubbling with energy. He clenches his left fist enthusiastically. The guy looks at this in bewilderment and thinks that the beastman's perception is heightened. The protagonist, with a peaceful face, says that, in fact, this potato is improved, and when you eat it, you get the effect of increasing vitality. The man is surprised that this is possible. Isagi says that even though he says so, it has little effect. The man continues to eat the delicious dish. Eventually, his plate is completely empty. Mercia picks up the dirty dishes and takes them away. The man and the boy are left outside. Kelsey thoughtfully puts her hand to her chin and asks the guy if they can grow even in this village if they plant the plants he has perfected with alchemy. The guy answers positively and says that of course they can grow. The main character, with an inspired face and a confident voice, putting his hand on his chest, says that he will do so that they can, even if they can't, because it's his job. The man looks at him in surprise, but remains silent. Isagi says that to ensure a stable supply, he will further expand his fields and grow other improved varieties of plants to enable him to harvest a variety of crops. Kelsey smiles peacefully and thinks that he will make these lands fertile because he has the power to do so. The man loudly exclaims, agreeing with him, and, putting one hand on his side, says that he trusts this matter to him. The guy, with sincerity in his voice, loudly thanks him and says that in that case he will gradually do it. The next day he managed to sow other fields and plant tomatoes and carrots. Everything around his house is planted with different plants. The number of fields has increased greatly. A boy and a girl are standing next to a golem. Isagi, a little embarrassed, says that it is awkward and asks Mercia if he has overdone it. She answers positively. The protagonist puts his hand to his forehead to shield his eyes from the scorching sun and looks into the distance. He thinks about how he used to have to grow plants in a huge area in the palace. So knowing that he had so much space at his disposal, he was so excited that he overdid it. Isagi, looking tired, takes out another potato bush. He breathes heavily and tries to catch his breath. Mercia and the golem behind him help him. The protagonist wipes under the pole with his right hand and sighs heavily. He wonders what to do with all this amount. He can just keep it in a magic bag. The girl approaches him with a puzzled expression, holding a large bag of harvest. Isagi says that they are short of hands and will not be able to collect even half of it by the end of the harvest season. Mercia asks him if it is possible to create another golem. The young man smiles shyly and says bashfully that he will no longer be able to create one because, unfortunately, he no longer has the magic stones. Suddenly, the young girl places her hand on her chest and enthusiastically suggests asking her father and mother for help. Mercia is completely confident that they will help them out. In this case, the protagonist is asked to wait a little. The girl agrees with him and says that for now they will work with the golem. The protagonist rests one hand on his side and reaches up with the other. He complains about his lower back with a tortured look. Suddenly, he hears a girl's voice from somewhere, asking in confusion what it is. The guy turns his head in her direction and finds Nea there. Isagi looks at the amazed girl and wishes her a good morning. She opens her eyes wide in surprise and covers her mouth with both hands, saying that their village had never had such a big field. The protagonist takes off his hat from his head and says that yesterday they cultivated with the help of alchemy. The girl exclaims in surprise and says that only 2 days have passed since he came. She also notes with disbelief in her voice that it is strange that anything can grow on this soil at all, and that it is also strange that the harvest time has come. The main character says with a smile on his face that it's all thanks to alchemy. The girl gets a little angry and closes her eyes in rage, squinting hard. She screams that he has one answer to everything. Suddenly, she hears a voice from the side. It says that Isagi is telling the truth and is addressing the girl by name. The boy looks at the newcomers in bewilderment. Nea turns around and is surprised to see Uncle Kelsey. The man, with a hoe resting on his shoulder, says with confidence that he saw it with his own eyes yesterday. The crops that Isagi modified grow even in this village. Next to him stand his smiling wife with a basket in her hands and his daughter. A delighted light appears in Nea's eyes, and the girl blushes a little. She clenches her hands into fists, and with an admiring smile on her face says that if Uncle says so, then it's true. Nea thinks that's cool. She turns towards the main character, and with enthusiasm and the same smile on her face, she assumes that they are now harvesting. The protagonist is a little embarrassed by her overly violent reaction, but confirms her words and with a modest smile on his face, says that he went a little overboard with the sowing. The man is surprised that so much has grown and says that he did not think that the field would grow so much in one day. Isagi scratches his head with his hand, throwing it back, and sincerely apologizes. He says that he overdid it in his joy. Kelsey says it's wonderful that their food-starved village is seeing such abundant crops. The village elder smiles and tells him not to worry. His wife also smiles at the guy and says that their village has such a rich harvest for the first time. The woman says that she is even somewhat excited. Nea next to them says that she will also help with the harvest. The guy looks at his new friends with joy. They urge him to start harvesting. Mercia and her mother are picking pumpkins and squashes with a smile on their faces. Kelsey is cutting a cabbage with a knife. The stone golem and the tired protagonist are picking beets. After a while, many baskets with different vegetables and fruits, including eggplants and mother-in-law, stand next to each other. Isagi wipes her forehead and exhales tiredly. Suddenly, Nea emerges from the nearby bushes and calls him by name. She holds a tomato in her left hand and points at it with her index finger in her other hand. The girl asks with a smile on her face if she can try it. The protagonist responds with the same smile and says that she can certainly try. The girl is very happy with his answer and exclaims loudly and enthusiastically. The girl with ears brings the tomato to her mouth with unimaginable pleasure and bites it. She blushes a little and touches her cheek with her hand, squinting from the enjoyment of the taste of the vegetable. The girl with an enthusiastic voice asks the main character what it is, and says that it is very tasty. The guy is happy with such a reaction. Nea says that it is very different from the tomatoes that she knows. Isagi explains to her that these tomatoes not only have accelerated growth, but also have increased sugar content. The girl exclaims with surprise and admiration, and says that this is cool. Mercia looks out from behind the bushes with a displeased face, watching them. The girl looks gloomy and says that it looks like they are having a lot of fun together. Nea chews a tomato, holding it with one hand, and looks at the girl. The guy also holds a tomato in his hand with bites and looks at her in surprise. Mercia picks up another tomato and says with an unperturbed expression that she will try it too. The protagonist happily agrees with her without question. The girl happily bites into the vegetable. Suddenly Nea comes up to her and props her side up. The girl covers her mouth with her hand and expresses her surprise that she has suddenly started acting nice. Mercia frowns a little and looks at her in bewilderment. Nea looks at her friend with a sly smile. Mercia's face turns so red that her head almost starts to smoke. She frowns at her friend's words and says her name in a rage. The girl yells at her to wait and catches up with Nea, who runs away from her. She yells that she is angry. Isagi, who is watching them from the side, chews a tomato and, with a slight smile on his face, thinks that these two get along well. 3 days later, Nea, Mercia, the village chief, his wife, and the protagonist himself are standing in a field not far from his home. Isagi says that the harvest is now over, and he is truly grateful for their help. Kelsey asks the boy what he is going to do with the harvest. The boy holds his bag in his hands and says with a smile on his face that he is going to give it to the villagers, because if you keep it in the magic bag like that, it will get clogged. Mercia's mother raises her left index finger and suggests throwing a banquet. The protagonist looks at her in surprise and asks the woman again about the banquet. She says with a big smile on her face that it would be nice to treat everyone to dishes prepared from the harvest gathered from your field. In this way, she believes that everyone will get to know you, and it will be easier to live together. Isagi hesitates a little, as he thinks that a banquet is a hassle, with preparations and all that. He touches his chin thoughtfully and remembers the banquets at the palace. Mercia addresses him by name. The girl explains to him that although it is called a banquet, it is a relaxed event, for which it is enough to invite people to the central square and set up chairs and tables. The guy says that he understands her. The village chief shouts that they will call the people and start preparing. He announces a banquet tonight. The protagonist enthusiastically agrees with him at first, but then is surprised that the banquet is tonight. After a while, the guy asks the girl if everything is ready, and says that they also need to hurry to the central square. He wonders if everything will go smoothly. Mercia does not understand his concern. Isagi says that he is a human, and that he has only just arrived here. The guy is very worried about this and hesitantly asks her if people will come to his banquet. The girl says that even though the banquet is scheduled for today, she thinks that everyone will be there. The protagonist looks at the square in surprise. Mercia turns to him and says that everyone will come because there haven't been such banquets for a long time. Isagi watches with surprise the large crowd of people behind the girl. Even small children are frolicking in the streets. The protagonist is surprised by such a large number of people. He looks at all this with a smile on his face. Mercia is also happy. Suddenly, Mercia's mother's voice can be heard from somewhere outside. The woman addresses Isagi by name and says that she already wants to start cooking, so he can help her if he brings the ingredients. The guy agrees. He dumps a variety of vegetables from his magic bag onto the table, including eggplants, tomatoes, onions, pumpkins, and carrots. The woman is surprised that there are so many products. The village chief's wife says that they haven't used so many fresh ingredients for a long time. She wonders what to cook for them. The protagonist happily watches the cheerful crowd. All the Beast Race residents were busy preparing for the festival. Everyone was doing their own duties. Among them, Mercia, Nea, and the rest were preparing the ingredients for the dish. After all the ingredients were prepared for cooking and placed directly into the cauldron, Isagi began to apply his alchemy power to the cauldron of food. All the inhabitants of the village of Plummenia watched this with nervous chatter, but soon the fire was lit, and the food in the cauldron began to cook. While the food was being cooked, the Beast Race girls were watching the cauldron and gradually adding other ingredients to the cauldron. Isagi watched this with a smile. He was interested in the process of cooking food. After a while, all the dishes were ready. While all the villagers were approaching the table to receive food, Kelsey, Mercia's father, called out to Isagi. The village chief was standing on the main stage at that moment. The man called the boy to come to him on stage for a minute. Isagi agreed to the village chief's request. Kelsey then addressed the villagers and thanked them for their presence at the gathering. He explained to them that it was because of Isagi that they owed such an abundance of food to their food-poor village. Isagi, hearing the man's speech, immediately blushed in embarrassment. He was surprised by the man's sudden speech because he did not expect that he would be introduced to the entire village so suddenly. Isagi stood on the stage, hesitant from the sudden introduction. However, after a moment, he decided to give a welcoming speech. After gathering himself a bit, Isagi introduced himself to them with a trembling voice. He also told them that he was an alchemist. The boy also said that he had only arrived in their village a few days ago and did not know much. The villagers smiled warmly at his timid and nervous speech. Then the boy pointed out that there were still plenty of ingredients, so he also informed them that the villagers could eat as much as they wanted. Nea and Mercia watched with smiles as Isagi performed on stage. The village chief, after the boy's unplanned introduction, wanted everyone to welcome the new resident named Isagi and drink drinks for him. Along with his words, the man raised a wooden mug with a drink in his hands. All the villagers raised their wooden mugs in celebration with cheerful smiles. They greeted the boy as their new villager with a loud roar. The villagers then happily drank their drinks to the bottom, celebrating the festival. The village of Plummenia was bustling with activity. Most of the residents were sitting at the festive tables with their families. Everyone was happy about the large amount of delicious food, something they had not had for a long time. The guy, walking through the street with festive tables, awkwardly noticed that there were no free seats. All the tables were occupied. Every resident was busy devouring delicious food. The lively noise was heard throughout the village. Suddenly, in the distance, the guy was called out. It was Mercia. She was already sitting at the festive table. The girl pointed out to Isagi that there was another free seat next to her and NEA. When the boy approached their table, the girl informed him that she had already managed to put a portion of food for the boy. Isagi, hearing her words, thanked Mercia for putting food for him. There was already a dish called pot-au-feu with vegetables on his plate. Pot-au-feu is a thick, rich soup made from beef and vegetables. Isagi was delighted just by the appetizing appearance of this dish. He then scooped a spoonful into his bowl of pot-au-feu. Isagi looked at the food with admiration. Mercia was flattered by this. Nea was also pleased by the admiring look of the boy. Isagi then tried the pot-au-feu with vegetables, enjoying its taste. After tasting the dish, he looked at his empty spoon with delight. Pot-au-feu with vegetables was simply a truly delicious dish. The sweetness of the carrots and onions combined perfectly with the sharp taste of black pepper. It was indescribably delicious. Isagi also tasted the pleasant flavor of potatoes, mushrooms, sausages, and a bunch of other ingredients in the dish. Mercia watched as the boy ate the pot-au-feu with vegetables with a smile. At this time, Nea also tasted the dish. The girl was delighted with the taste of the vegetable pot-au-feu. She told everyone with admiration that she had not eaten such a rich vegetable soup for a long time. Therefore, Nea enjoyed this delicious dish. It turned out that due to constant savings and poor food, they often had to use even vegetable peelings. Nea silently agreed with Mercia's words, but she was happy with so much food on the table. Their conversation was heard by a man of the beast race. He said with a sad and empty face that one day this banquet would end, and they would have to go back to their meager food again. The villagers who heard his words were stunned by these horrific words. They didn't want to listen to or think about such assumptions in the middle of the banquet, connected with the fact that the food would become scarce again, but that villager believed that it was true. Isagi watched all this with awkward shock. He realized that no one could do anything about the fact that some people had such thoughts, so he couldn't blame the man for his concern. At the same time, the man was slightly put down by the other residents. At the moment, the level of food supply in each house of this village did not rise in any way. The guy was upset by this annoying information. The recent smile disappeared from his face. Then the boy made one decision. So, in a loud voice, attracting the attention of all the villagers, he tried to calm the worried villagers. At this, Isagi stood up from his seat. The boy then loudly announced to the villagers of Plummenia that even they would be able to grow the crops he had selectively bred. All the villagers stopped eating and listened to the boy's words. The guy then explained to them that plant crops would grow well even in their depleted soil, since they were resistant to cold and viruses. The worried residents listened to Isagi's speech in shock. Then the silver-haired boy also made a firm promise to all the villagers that he would distribute the seeds of these crops to them all. Isagi looked at them with a confident look. Naya was surprised by the boy's words. The brown-haired girl was stunned that even she could grow plants. Isagi did not deny it. He agreed with the girl. If Naya would take good care of the seeds, the girl would also be able to grow nutritious plants with tasty fruits. The girl was delighted with this information. The villagers began to whisper among themselves after the guy's words. The man, hearing the guy's words, was in deep shock. He said out loud in disbelief that he thought he was in a dream. The man was stunned by the boy's sudden offer to help increase the food supply of their village called Plummenia. However, this villager was also worried that the guy named Isagi had only recently arrived in their village. The man did not understand why he was doing so much for them, the villagers. So he asked the guy himself. Mercia was worried about Isagi because the man said offensive words to him. For the villager did not understand why a stranger like Isagi was doing all this for them. However, the boy was calm from the man's rude question and did not show any other emotions. His anger was shown only by his clenched fist. Then he began his explanation. Isagi told the man everything. That as a baby, he was thrown out in front of a church in the Imperial capital. He was an orphan. The villager was shocked. Isagi continued to tell his life story. He fought for the meager crumbs of food that were given to him. The boy lived, suffering from hunger. The inhabitants of the village of Plummenia were stunned by his sad story. In the end, Isagi told them that this is why he knows what it's like to go without food. With his words, the boy showed that he knew what it was like to be hungry and not have a lot of tasty food every day. It was because of this that the boy asked them with a smile, that doesn't every person want to eat delicious food to their fill? Although the boy told them about his sad childhood, he wasn't sad about it. The man was stunned not only by the boy's sad story, but also by the fact that despite everything, he continued to smile widely at the world. He looked at Isagi with wide eyes. He then awkwardly apologized to Isagi for expressing doubts about him. However, the boy was not worried about it, since if he were a villager, he would also have the same doubts. Mercia looked at the blonde boy with a smile. Then the villager with a determined attitude asked Isagi if it would be easy for him to share his seeds with him. If there was plenty of food on his dinner table, the man wanted to ask for some too and try to grow his own food. Then someone raised his palm. At the same time, the rest of the villagers began to raise their hands. After the man's request, other villagers began to approach Isagi. They all wanted to get the seeds and try farming. Isagi was overwhelmed by the rush of people to get the seeds. He calmed the excitement of the Plummenian villagers with some panic. He told them that he had plenty of seeds, so there would be enough for everyone. Mercia watched all this with a warm smile. No matter how strong a person is, no matter how outstanding a person is, when he eats poorly, his heart will harden, and then he will forget the reason for his own life. Even after becoming an alchemist, Isagi continued his research in the field of food. The boy was distributing the plant seeds he had developed. The villagers were crowding into a huge line for the bags of seeds. He understood that everyone was equal in the face of hunger. So he did all this so that more people could fight hunger. In that case, Isagi would like to further develop farming in this world. The boy looked at the happy villagers who had received the bag of seeds with a confident look. Among them he noticed a familiar man who already had a huge bag of seeds in his hands. Isagi knew that if the villagers took up farming sooner, the food situation in their village of Plummenia would improve significantly. Kelsey was also busy with the work of distributing seeds to his villagers. Then the man holding a bag of seeds called out to all the villagers of Plummenia again with his loud voice, thus drawing everyone's attention. The man understood that all this was happening to make this village more prosperous, so he motivated his villagers because this was hope for a better future. The villagers raised their mugs of drink up. Night had fallen, it was already dark outside. Only bright lanterns illuminated the village. The inhabitants of Plummenia were happy that they would be able to improve their quality of life, so they drank their drinks to the bottom with a joyful hum that day. Meanwhile, in the Ramirez Empire, specifically in the Ramirez Imperial Castle, the head alchemist was reading a report about the increase in production of magic tools and items to a guy who was more senior to him. Then, that guy called him by the name Garius. It turned out that the boy was a prince, first in line to the throne. His name was Weiss Drevenshire Ramirez. He wanted to ask the man why there had been no report on Isagi this month. Crown Prince Weiss wanted to understand what Isagi was doing. The chief alchemist named Garius was stunned that his master Weiss had remembered the impudent commoner. The man was unable to answer the prince's question for a moment, causing an awkward silence to fill the room. He then told Prince Weiss that he had simply fired the commoner. The man had thought that he was just a dependent. For a moment, the room was silent again. The crown prince was stunned by this news and wanted to know the reason for Isagi's dismissal. The man then arrogantly explained to the prince that the job of an alchemist in this empire was to make magical tools and items for military purposes. Isagi did none of this, except for the bare minimum. After explaining the reason for Isagi's dismissal, Crown Prince Weiss Ramirez immediately became angry and called the man with long hair a fool. His angry slap on the table was heard in the office. After all, he had done a terrible thing to them. Garius himself was surprised that the prince was in such a furious state, just because he fired the impudent commoner Isagi. The man was shocked by the situation, because he did not consider that alchemist to be that special. Prince Weiss angrily told Garius that they had hoped that the crops Isagi had developed would be able to remedy their dire situation of food shortages in the empire, so he entrusted it to Isagi and increased the budget. But Garius still, despite the prince's anger, called Isagi useless in a trembling voice. The man could not believe that the research of that low-status guy was so valuable compared to the creation of magical weapons. However, the angry voice of Crown Prince Weiss convinced him otherwise. Prince Weiss Ramirez asked the chief of alchemists in a furious voice what he could possibly see in his subordinates, other than status. The crown prince considered Garius to be untalented. The gray-haired man immediately began to tremble all over, realizing the gravity of the situation. The crown prince continued to look coldly and angrily at the chief of all alchemists. Cold sweat was pouring down Garius's pale face. The chief of the alchemists did not understand what to do now. After all, the crown prince was angry with his actions. Prince Weiss, with a grim face and an angry voice, ordered the white-haired man to immediately provide him with an alternative to food production. They needed to increase food. Then the crown prince stopped and paused. Garius was sweating coldly in fear at the crown prince's terrifying anger, waiting for his master Weiss's next words about another way to solve the problem. Having intimidated the man even more with this minute pause, Prince Weiss loudly and angrily added another option to the chief of the alchemists. Garius must either return Isagi back to him. Meanwhile, the boy was busy with agricultural matters. It was light outside. The gray-haired grandmother, holding a hoe in her hands, thanked Isagi. After all, it was all thanks to him. She never thought that a crop would grow on such bad soil. Therefore, the resident was happy about it. Mercia and Isagi were happy to hear their grandmother praise them for helping them grow their crops. They smiled and said at the same time that the most important thing for them was that she was happy. Then the girl and the boy said goodbye to the gray-haired grandmother. Thanks to the fact that they distributed the seeds of selectively bred crops to the villagers of Plummenia, this happened. Namely, in the village of Plummenia, there was an agricultural furor. All the inhabitants of the village of Plummenia were busy growing the seeds received from the boy. Everyone was doing their duties in the field to grow plants and fruits. The beast race girl noted that if everything remained calm, the village of Plummenia would be able to reap a large harvest. Isagi agreed with this, but the boy was puzzled by something. Isagi was very worried about something, which made the guy thoughtful. Mercia, seeing the guy's thoughtful and worried state, immediately became worried and wanted to know the reason for his bewilderment. Then the guy explained to her that the fertilizer they were currently using was obtained by Isagi by improving the Imperial fertilizer. In general, at this rate, this fertilizer would run out in a few years. Mercia looked at the guy in surprise. Isagi continued to speak. He told her that this was the reason they needed a new fertilizer that could be produced in this village. The girl continued to look at Isagi in surprise. Isagi was thoughtful. They also had the option of buying Imperial fertilizer through traveling merchants. However, it was still best for them to make fertilizer from the village's raw materials, because it would not cost them as much as buying it from merchants at a high price. The girl understood that if she constantly received fertilizer from Isagi's pocket, it would not make this problem disappear forever. Isagi, after hearing the black-haired girl's words, decided to first collect the fertilizers that have long been used in the village of Plummenia. He decisively told Mercia about this. Mercia listened to the boy's final decision. She promised him to ask the peasant families she knew in the village of Plummenia about the fertilizer, and ask these friends to share it with her. After some time, the boy and girl were in their house. On their table were only 3 types of fertilizer from the village. Isagi told her that it was not enough for them. There was only one reason for the fertilizer to be so small. Because the soil in the village was so poor, there were also few people who farmed. But this was enough to create the basis for the new Isagi fertilizer. To make a better Isagi fertilizer, you will need raw materials that contain a little more of the magical power that is inherent to this village. Mercia, hearing this, told the boy with a smile that then, in order to obtain the necessary village raw materials with magical power, they should better head to the forest. Isagi was a little surprised by this proposal from the girl. Then Mercia explained to him that in the forest, they would certainly be able to collect the necessary natural materials that were only found there. The girl pointed to the window, and a forest appeared before them. Isagi realized that it seemed that the necessary raw materials would be found there. Therefore, Isagi made the decision to go there with a confident smile. The guy already wanted to go to the forest for the village raw materials alone. However, his further words about it suddenly stopped, because suddenly for him the girl also told him that she would go to the forest with him. The guy was stunned by her words that she would also go there. The girl told him that she had often gone to this forest before. Moreover, she would be with him as a guide, so the collection of material for them would go smoothly. However, Isagi was worried that the forest was too dangerous for the girl. Mercia told the boy to be calm, trying to calm his anxiety. Then she grabbed her mop tightly. Mercia then calmly said that she was, after all, a servant. The girl confidently told him this while she held her mop in her hands, as if it were a weapon. But Isagi just looked at the black-haired girl with a puzzled look. He didn't understand how a maid's status was related to her physical safety. It turned out that maids needed fighting power to protect their master. Isagi was momentarily taken aback by the girl's words about maids needing combat power to work. Then he could only awkwardly accept the information that Mercia had combat skills. After some time, the girl and the boy were already in the forest. Isagi looked at the beauty of the forest with surprise. Meanwhile, the girl had long been accustomed to this area, so she was not surprised. They continued on their way. The boy looked at the fauna of the forests of the village of Plummenia with interest and curiosity. Mercia walked ahead of him, showing him the way, like a guide. Isagi, looking at this forest, noticed that maybe, because it was in the territory of the Beast Kingdom, its flora was slightly different from that of the Empire. He asked the black-haired girl about this. Then Mercia calmly explained to him that in nature there is a fierce struggle for survival. Therefore, for them this was normal. Animals and plants evolve faster themselves. While the girl was explaining to him the reason for the difference between the fauna of the animal kingdom and the empire, Isagi suddenly saw a bush. They were not far from him. The guy was attracted by them. It turns out that there were star-shaped tree fruits growing on that bush. The guy was very interested in this fruit and wanted to touch it. However, he was stopped by Mercia's words. The girl informed him that if he touched the fruit of this plant, acid would be released from it. Isagi immediately pulled his hand away from the tree fruit in fear. The boy realized with embarrassment that he should have made a precise assessment of the plants, rather than trying to touch them right away. But Mercia understood that sometimes there were dangerous plants in the forest, like this one. Alchemists had an ability that could carry out an examination of any matter. The guy frowned for a moment, and then, opening his eyes wide, used an ability called examination on a bush with tree fruits. This plant was called carambola. It grows in the forest in the southern part of the animal kingdom. If you squeeze its tree fruit, it will immediately squirt out the acid it contains. If the acid gets on your skin, you should immediately wash it with water and start treatment immediately. The girl thought about how to approach this plant. Isagi wanted to collect the woody fruits of the carambola. It seemed to him that they could become a good raw material resource for a solution of strong acid and a solution for weeding. Then Mercia decided to help the guy in collecting these fruits. With the help of a thick cloth, she helped the guy in collecting tree fruits, thereby preventing the acid from the fruits from coming out. After all, only when touched did the acid splash out. While the girl held the tree fruit with a thick towel, Isagi easily cut the tree fruit from the carambola plant with the help of small scissors. After that, the guy was busy collecting raw materials from the tree fruits. He lightly pierced the carambola fruits with a needle, then collected the acid solution from these fruits in a test tube and put everything in his magic bag. At the same time, Mercia helped him with this. Isagi wiped the sweat that had appeared on his forehead with his hand with a slight weariness. Then the boy said out loud that, after all, for him, gathering in practice was a very interesting and fun pastime. Mercia, hearing his words, asked Isagi about gathering in the Empire. The girl, based on the guy's words, thought that in the Empire they did not particularly allow this. The boy agreed with the girl's assumption. It was true. He had always been told that it was better to entrust the gathering of the materials they needed to knights or adventurers. Although he actually managed to deal directly with the materials, the guy wanted to continue talking, but then suddenly stopped. Then suddenly, the girl called out to her master with a scream. Isagi, who had turned pale, was dumbfounded with horror and looked off to the side with a frightened look. After all, a terrifying monster suddenly appeared in front of them. Its appearance was similar to a beast-like boar, only its size was much larger than the size of an ordinary boar. The girl and the guy tried to quietly move away from the monster. They looked warily towards the huge boar that had suddenly appeared near them. Isagi whispered to the girl about this monster. Then Mercia told him that this huge beast-like boar was a demon. This demonic monster had a violent character and could quickly attack everyone with its sharp and large fangs. Suddenly, the demonic monster began to run furiously towards them, while opening its mouth wide. The rattling saliva from its mouth flew to the sides. With the help of its huge fangs in its mouth, it wanted to attack them. Isagi was tense and scared from the gravity of the situation. The pale boy was terrified of what they had to do to avoid being attacked and injured by this demonic monster. Suddenly, a girl called out to him in a calm voice, causing the guy to come to his senses a little. The tense Isagi turned his gaze straight to the girl. Then she told him that Isagi should leave it to her. The girl wanted to deal with the monster herself. Mercia confidently stood in front of the guy, because of which Isagi was frightened and stunned. He wanted to stop the girl. Meanwhile, a beast-like boar of enormous size was rapidly heading towards them. The demonic monster wanted to attack the boy and girl. A boar of enormous size ran furiously towards the girl. Mercia was ready to deal with the monster. Isagi stood not far from them. He looked at the girl tensely. However, when the demonic monster approached her and tried to attack the black-haired girl, she instantly disappeared from his sight. Because of this, he was unable to attack her with his sharp fangs. The demonic monster was surprised by her sudden disappearance, so it tried to find its missing prey by turning its head in all directions. Isagi, however, was looking at the demonic boar warily, standing not far from it. Suddenly looking up, the demonic monster noticed something, which caused the beast-like boar's eyes to widen in surprise for a moment. A shadow of a girl appeared on his face. she was right above him. It turned out that the girl was right above the demonic monster. With a jump, Mercia flew up and did a somersault in the air. The huge boar noticed this and rushed forward, trying to avoid the attack from the black-haired girl. However, Mercia, by quickly flipping several times in the air, was able to quickly approach the demonic monster that was running away from her. After that, she prepared her fist to attack the beast-like boar. Then the girl, approaching the demonic monster, raised her fist up to attack the dumbfounded beast-like boar. She needed to deal with the monster quickly, because Isagi's safety was her main goal. Approaching the demonic monster's body, the girl attacked it with her fist right in its snout. The beast-like boar did not even have time to turn away from her attack. All that was left for him to do was to take the full force of the blow. Her attack was so powerful that the demonic boar was sent flying several meters away and collided directly with a tree. Isagi only managed to move away from the tree so that he would not be hit by the flying beast-like boar from the impact. After the girl attacked the monster with her fist, she calmly and resolutely watched as the demonic boar flew away several meters. The monster was defeated. Now Isagi's safety was not in danger. Isagi was deeply shocked that Mercia could defeat such a formidable and huge demonic monster with just one blow. He looked with great surprise at the boar that was defeated by the black-haired girl. Then Mercia explained to him that she could not allow her master Isagi to be busy with unnecessary troubles like this. The girl calmly shook the dust off her maid outfit after the battle with the beast-like boar. Isagi knew that the physical abilities of the beast race were greater than those of other races. But Mercia's combat power was far above the norm. Therefore, the boy momentarily doubted that Mercia was a simple servant. He asked her about it. Mercia, hearing the guy's question, answered him that she really was a servant. The girl was silent for a second, choosing her words. Mercia then continued to answer Isagi's question. She told him that, however, as a human of the beast race, the girl could only serve in the Imperial castle because she possessed great combat power. Therefore, Mercia had many different night jobs. The girl agreed to this. She sees well at night, and also her appearance as a maid easily misled others. Sometimes it happened that bandits tried to attack her. The boy looked at the black-haired girl with a warm smile. He thought that in the Empire, where the beast race people were looked down upon, it was natural to demand more from them. Suddenly the girl remembered that, especially recently at work, she was persistently persuaded to take on a dark job. Therefore, Mercia was relieved that she was able to quit at the same time as Isagi. The guy was stunned by this information about dark work. However, Isagi also told Mercia that, thanks to her and the rest of the guards, a man like him was able to live safely in the castle. The girl, hearing his words, looked at the guy with surprise. She was stunned by the guy's words, and Isagi continued to speak. He thanked his companion for what she did and does for him. The guy looked at Mercia with a grateful smile for everything. The girl was amazed by his grateful speech. The girl was silent for a moment and could not find words to respond to his gratitude. Then, with an embarrassed face, the blushing Mercia said that since the night guard was also the servant's duty, therefore it was, of course. With these words, the girl tried to say that it was a trifling matter for her. Mercia, her face flushed, looked away in embarrassment, just not at the guy. But Mercia's true mood was shown by her black animal tail wagging in all directions. Isagi thought that the duties the girl sometimes did were usually the duties of knights. Then the guy changed the topic. He noticed something. Isagi remembered that there should be a magic stone in the body of the demonic monster. Mercia heard about it for the first time and did not know any information about the magic stone. Then Isagi explained to her that the magical power that the monster receives from the atmosphere and predation is stored in its magic stone. Alchemists use magic stones to create various items. He then approached the boar's body. Then the guy began to confidently search the demonic monster's body for its flow of magical power, in order to determine the exact location of the beast-like boar's magical stone. After a while, Isagi used his palm to find the exact location of the magic flow on the beast-like boar's body. It was somewhere in the demonic monster's neck. The guy felt it with his palm. Afterwards, Isagi began to search for something in his magic bag, and soon, he took out a dagger from there. Then the guy began to aim the dagger directly at the location of the flow of magical power of the beast-like boar. having cut the monster's skin right at the place of the flow of magical power. The boy and the black-haired girl saw an incredible and unusual object. Isagi looked at something in shock. The magic stone of the beast-like boar appeared before them. Its magic stone was very large, and in addition, the quality of its magic power was very good. They got quite a large prey in the form of this monster, but the girl didn't think so. She told him that this demonic monster, although huge in size, was only a medium-sized monster in this forest. The girl's words left the guy in deep shock, because in the Imperial capital, monsters that are larger than the palm of your hand are rarely kept. But in this place, a monster like a huge boar was a normal-sized monster to the other inhabitants. So Isagi asked Mercia about the number of monsters in the area around Plummenia village. Mercia thought for a moment. Then she informed Isagi that if the number of monsters was not reduced periodically, a herd of monsters would come to their village Plummenia. Isagi was stunned by this information. After all, he had a wonderful opportunity to collect many magic stones of such good quality. Now it was practically possible for him. Isagi enthusiastically decided to make these magic stones into raw materials for creating a new fertilizer. It would be much faster for them than making it from raw materials that had some magic power. Then the girl suggested the guy to collect a lot of magic stones from the beast-like monsters. Isagi agreed to the girl's proposal. Then they were going to start looking for the next monster to extract magic stones from. But their search for the next monsters was stopped for a moment by a girl. Before they went to look for monsters with magic stones, Mercia wanted to say something to Isagi. The boy looked at her, waiting for her next words. It turned out that the girl wanted to take with her the demonic meat of the beast-like boar she had defeated, because the meat of demonic monsters was very tasty. At these words, Mercia had already descended to the body of the beast-like boar. The boy, understanding the girl's request, apologized to her, since Isagi was too preoccupied with thoughts only about collecting raw materials for creating fertilizer. Mercia needed a little time to obtain meat from the demonic boar. Then Mercia began to clear the monster. While the girl was cutting up the boar, the boy took out a wooden barrel from his magic bag. Isagi realized that this place was indeed different from the Imperial castle. In order to survive, they had to find and obtain their own food. An example of this was Mercia. The girl was seriously and carefully cutting up the carcass of a demonic boar. Near her on the ground were various devices for cutting up the carcass of a beast-like boar. There was also a bucket for cleaning up various liquids. The girl put all the meat directly into a wooden barrel. The boy noticed that he, as before, only stocked up on materials and made what others asked for. He watched as Mercia butchered the carcass of a beast-like boar. Then Isagi called out to the black-haired girl, distracting her from butchering the boar. After his call, Isagi, looking at the girl, asked her to also teach him how to cut up a carcass. Mercia heard the guy's request. She stood right next to the hanging carcass of a boar. This was to make it easier to cut up the carcass. For a moment, Mercia, hearing his words, was stunned by the boy's sudden request to teach him how to cut up a monster carcass. She looked at Isagi in surprise for a moment. But then the next second, the girl just smiled warmly at the guy. After that, she agreed to Isagi's request to help him learn how to cut up a carcass. After a while, their small cloth bag was filled to the brim with a large number of magic stones. The job was done. Therefore, Mercia suggested that Isagi return to the village. The carcasses of the monsters they had defeated were located next to them. The guy also understood that such a quantity of magic stones would be enough for them to create a new fertilizer. The boy wanted to go back to the village, so he took one step forward on the ground. Suddenly, Isagi felt something with his foot, because of which the boy stopped and did not continue his way to the village. Isagi dropped to one knee and looked at his palm in shock. It was stained with the ground he had just stepped on. The boy noticed that the quality of the soil in the forest began to gradually change. He realized that this was because they had gone quite deep into the forest. That's why the boy didn't want to go back to the village. Isagi wanted to explore the further territory of the forest. He told his companion about it. Mercia was just cleaning the daggers after cutting up demonic monsters. Then the boy pointed to a mountain that was far away from them. Isagi wanted to ask the girl if there was ore on this mountain. The girl, hearing the boy's question, looked towards the mountain. She informed him that ore was indeed mined on that mountain. However, Mercia was concerned that if they went straight to get the ore, the whole process would take too long. However, everything was fine for the boy. Isagi reassured the girl, explaining that with the power of alchemy, he could understand the approximate location of the ore deposit. Therefore, the process would not be as long as the girl thought. Now, Mercia was not worried about this. The boy looked determinedly in the direction of the mountain, which was far away from them. After all, if there were ore deposits there, then Isagi would be able to make more golems and buildings. He was interested in this. Then Isagi excitedly told his companion that it was time for them to go and look for ore. The ore deposits were waiting for them on the mountain, not far from them. After some time, they were able to reach the mountain they needed. During their journey, they had to go through a narrow path located right on the mountain. The girl was worried about the guy, so she asked him if he was okay. However, Isagi told her that he was fine, although in reality, the guy was scared and tense in his soul from the danger of the narrow path. After all, the mountain path was too narrow, and there was also a possibility of falling from it straight into the cliff. It was hard for him to walk it. The guy was in a nervous state. Cold sweat was running down his face due to the fear of slipping and falling from the narrow mountain path. Meanwhile, Mercia walked along the narrow path with ease, and was not afraid of danger, because it was easy for her to walk this way. The guy in his mind was a little envious that she moved so deftly even in her maid uniform. Then the girl suddenly jumped off the narrow path, straight down, jumping over the entire descent through narrow paths, thereby making her way easier. Isagi couldn't jump like the girl, so he had to go down and walk all the narrow, dangerous paths himself. Then, after a tired guy approached her, Mercia told him that there was an underground passage next to them. The boy was breathing heavily from fatigue and tension due to the danger of passing narrow mountain paths. From the difficulty of descending and crossing the narrow road, Isagi was completely sweaty and tired, but they finally reached the place they needed. Then the boy and the girl entered the underground passage they needed. Isagi noticed that it was quite old. Mercia explained to him that since the underground passage had been dug a long time ago, its wear and tear was progressing. Isagi, looking at the structure of the underground passage, realized that, in general, the strengthening of the earth by burning prevents the collapse of the ceiling and walls. Although the wooden structures of the passage were quite old, they supported the ceiling well. He then asked the girl's permission to reinforce the worn-out part of the underground passage. Mercia, of course, allowed him to do so. After that, the boy raised his palm and activated his magic power. At that moment, a large magic circle appeared at the entrance of the underground passage. Then Isagi, using the power of alchemy, reconstructed and strengthened the entire underground passage. Soon he succeeded. The underground passage was strengthened and ready for his exploration and search for ore deposits. Mercia, after strengthening the underground passage, led the guy inside the underground passage. Isagi waited for her to enter the passage. The girl walked ahead of the guy at a small distance, thereby leading him straight into the underground passage, while the guy was carefully examining everything at the entrance, namely the design of the entrance to the underground passage. Upon entering, Isagi noticed with a gloomy feeling that the underground passage was too dark for him, and because of this, he was a little sad. Because of the darkness, he would not be able to study the structure of the underground passage well and navigate it. Then Isagi remembered that the beast race people could see well in the dark, so the girl could safely walk along the underground passage. Concerned about this, Mercia immediately apologized to the guy, because she forgot to prepare a lamp for him to light the underground passage. So in that case, the guy himself took the lamp out of his magic bag. Then he twisted the button on it, thereby the guy lit the lamp. It was because of the stone inside the lamp that the lamp could illuminate the underground passage. The warm light from the lamp illuminated the passage. Then Isagi wanted to continue walking along the underground passage, lighting the way with this lamp. Namely, it was a magical device in the form of a lamp. Mercia looked at the device in surprise. Then the girl decided to carry the magic device herself, because Isagi had to focus on finding ore deposits. The guy thanked the girl for her help. After a while, they found themselves in the depths of an underground passage, while the girl walked ahead of the guy and carried a lamp, thereby illuminating their path. Isagi carefully examined the mine. All this was in order to find ore deposits. Soon the boy, with the help of his alchemist's sense, was able to find the supposed location of the ore deposit. He pointed out their further direction with his finger. After that, the guy approached the stone wall of the underground passage. Then he put his palm right on a certain place. With the help of the alchemist's abilities, he felt something inside there. Namely, in this area of the stone wall of the underground passage, there was a huge amount of ore deposits. The guy enthusiastically told his companion about it. Mercia held a lamp in her hand, illuminating the passage. But then she left the lamp somewhere and immediately pulled out a pickaxe from nowhere. The girl wanted to start digging the ore deposits. However, Isagi told her that there was no need for that. After all, the guy could have gotten the ore out of the wall in another way. Isagi explained everything to Mercia. If it is possible to strengthen the properties of matter by sending a stream of magical power through it using alchemy, then it means that it is possible to make matter more fragile. The boy then placed his palms on a certain spot on the stone wall of the underground passage. A magic circle immediately appeared at that spot. After all, if he applied force to a structurally weak spot, he could do it. Namely, to destroy the obstacle to the ore deposits in the form of a stone wall of the underground passage. Then Isagi used alchemy, and at the same time the magic circle expanded on the stone wall of the underground passage. Soon, the ore they needed easily came out from the ruined place where the magic circle had appeared. Isagi, seeing this, asked the black-haired girl to collect the ore that had fallen to the ground from the deposits. After that, the boy again placed his palm on the stone wall of the underground passage. Isagi wanted to continue his work again, extracting ore from the deposits. The guy easily found the deposits and quickly marked them. At that very second, several magic circles appeared on the stone wall, which were created with the help of alchemy. Thus the guy aimed and hit the ore deposits. Mercia, seeing this, was shocked. The girl had almost collected all the ores that had fallen to the ground from the stone wall of the underground passage into a bag. But then the next second, ores began to rapidly pour out from the places marked by magic circles. Isagi quickly ran forward in search of new places with ore deposits. Stones of different ores continued to fly out of the destroyed place of the stone walls and fall down to the floor. Suddenly, Isagi called out to Mercia, which caused the guy to stop and turn towards the black-haired girl. It turned out that Mercia wanted the boy to slow down a bit in his search for ore because her legs were completely covered in ore up to her knees. Isagi, realizing his mistake, immediately apologized to the black-haired girl in a stunned manner. After a while, the girl was able to free herself from the blockage of a large amount of ore. Isagi told her that they would sort the collected ore and extract it at the same place. Mercia accepted the guy's order and obeyed him. Then the boy sat on the floor with the black-haired girl. Isagi carefully examined each piece of ore. Meanwhile, Mercia calmly awaited his assessment, sorting through the piles of ore. A lamp stood next to them, illuminating everything. Soon the boy realized that they had found many different ores, namely iron ore, copper ore, lead, magic ore. They also had a little gold and precious stones. Isagi continued to carefully examine the stones of different ores. But, as the boy expected, they did not find adamantite and mithril in the ores they received. The girl said that she did not expect anything else from Mr. Isagi. The guy was surprised by the girl's sudden words. He did not understand what she was talking about. He looked at Mercia with an uncomprehending look. The girl then explained to him that such drilling technology would be in great demand in various mines. Thus, with her words, she pointed out Isagi's excellent abilities. Isagi explained to her that alchemists were actually sent to the extraction chambers, but since it was hard to live there, among the nobility it was considered to be hard labor. In Isagi's case, he was indeed sent there often. The boy's face darkened at the memory. The hard labor was terrible. Mercia was worried about the boy's changed mood. However, the next second the guy came to his senses and calmed down, trying to forget the unpleasant memories of that place. After all, Isagi had to start processing the ore they had received at that moment. Then the boy pointed his open palm straight towards the ore. In this way, Isagi wanted to apply magic power to this ore. After that, his magic power began to affect that ore. At that moment, the ore from an ugly form turned into a certain form, namely an ingot. Thus, the ore completely changed its structure. The girl caught one ingot of the processed ore in a daze. It had such a smooth and clean surface that it even showed its reflection, that is, it had a mirror surface. The girl looked at the ingot of processed ore in amazement. The guy continued to process different types of ores. He wanted to push and process the ore faster. The girl woke up from the shock and began to help Isagi. Soon, the boy and the girl continued their work in silence. Isagi was busy processing the ore he had received. Meanwhile, the girl was calmly waiting for him, sometimes helping Isagi. After some time, almost all types of ores were processed. Several ingots of ores of different sizes were lying on the floor. The guy, looking at the result, decided that it was time to leave the underground passage. The girl asked the boy if they had mined a lot of ore from this mountain. They had indeed collected quite a large amount of ore. Isagi was sure that a lot of things could be made from all this ore. The boy was delighted that he would be able to increase the number of golems. Isagi was also excited to strengthen the main field and make more convenient agricultural tools to increase the harvest. Isagi was beside himself with happiness not only from creating these things, because what's best is that he can create this. The girl didn't understand what the guy was talking about, so she asked the guy about it. Then Isagi turned directly to the black-haired girl and looked at Mercia with a satisfied expression on his face. The guy did not answer the girl's question. After some time, they were already in the village. The boy and girl were on empty land not far from their home. And only then did Isagi enthusiastically tell the black-haired girl that he wanted to create his workshop right there. The girl was surprised by the guy's words and therefore asked him again about the workshop. Isagi then explained to her that if the alchemical processing failed, the explosion could even blow the building up. The processing could also produce a strong smell, so he wanted a workshop separate from the house. Then Mercia offered the guy her help in this matter, namely help in building the workshop building. However, Isagi refused her offer. He could handle it himself. Then the guy changed the subject. He told Mercia that the second harvest season had already come, so the girl would really help him out if she helped other villagers with fieldwork. Mercia listened to the guy's words. The boy had already turned away from the departing Mercia. The girl, holding a basket in her hands, was heading towards the fields to help the residents of her village with the harvest of the second season. Now Isagi was left alone with himself. The guy wanted to get down to business already. A huge amount of work awaited him with the construction of the workshop. Therefore, he wanted to start it as soon as possible. First, he wanted to decide on the size of the workshop. The guy tried to determine the size they needed with his steps. Isagi dreamed of a very large workshop. However, since a large workshop would be troublesome to maintain and support, the guy refrained from this decision. Then, using tape and posts, he oriented himself according to the size of the house he needed. Isagi also understood that there was no need to separate the rooms in his workshop in any way. One workstation and a storage room in his workshop building were enough for him. The boy began to unwind the tape. Soon the boy was able to use tape and posts to mark out a certain plot of land for his workshop. This was roughly the size he wanted his workshop to be. The workshop plot was larger than his house plot. After a while, the boy also brought materials there to build a workshop. Isagi prepared wood for building a house, and also bricks to increase the strength of the building. Now he had to prepare the mortar. Then the boy pulled out a wooden box and placed it on the ground. After that, he poured cement and sand from a cloth bag into the box. He put cement and sand in the box in a ratio of 1:3. Isagi then mixed the mixture using an alchemical method, turning it into a homogeneous mass in an instant. To do this, he placed a magic circle on the box with the cement and sand mixture in order to mix everything. Next, he made a hole in the center of the box and then slowly poured water in, stirring the resulting mixture again. When the lumps dissolve and the mixture thickens, everything will be ready. Soon, the mortar in the wooden box was ready. As expected, the mortar was thick and lump-free. Then the boy started laying bricks along the outer wall. All this he did with his magic power. At the same time, he covered the bricks with cement. All this he did with the help of a magic circle. Then Isagi, having covered them with cement, began to lay bricks on top of that again. Then the guy just methodically carried out these repetitive actions of laying bricks and covering them with cement. Soon, Isagi's workshop was almost built. The main part of the work was done. All that was left for him to do was to finish the roof of the building. The boy looked at his workshop. Isagi began to sweat from the work of building the workshop. The guy, seeing the almost finished workshop, noticed only one thing, namely, even having laid only bricks, the workshop already had a pleasant atmosphere. Then the guy started thinking about what to do next. Then he continued building his workshop. He wanted to do the interior decoration of the workshop. After a while, the girl, holding a basket in her hands, returned from the fields. She had finished helping the other villagers with the harvest. Mercia walked forward without looking. Then the girl turned towards the workshop and called out to the guy. She wanted to ask him about how his workshop construction was going, and it was then that the girl could fully see the guy's workshop. Mercia, seeing the building, froze for a moment with an admiring look. After all, a beautiful-looking tall brick house appeared before her. It was simple and not pretentious, but it had a pleasant and cozy atmosphere. Near the house there were boards in a box, which showed that it had only recently been completely built. Then the girl headed towards the built workshop. Already outside on the street she heard the guy's voice. Isagi was glad that now the rooms were and looked like an alchemist's workshop. Mercia quietly knocked on the workshop door and asked Isagi's permission to enter the building. The guy, although busy with something, heard the girl's voice and immediately allowed her to enter. Then the girl opened the door of Isagi's workshop. However, she did not enter the room. Mercia stood for a moment right at the entrance to the workshop. After all, she was amazed by the scene she saw inside. A well-located lit room with windows appeared before the girl. There was already a table with alchemical devices in the room. There were also open boxes on the floor, and Isagi was busy arranging things in the room. He looked at the frozen girl awkwardly. Then Isagi told her that he was just doing interior design. Mercia looked at the guy with admiration and silence. She complimented the guy on the aesthetics of the house. Not only were the walls of the workshop beautiful on the outside, but the interior decoration of the house was also good. Isagi blushed at her compliment. He was delighted by the girl's words. Then the guy excitedly started telling her non-stop about how he built his workshop. By changing the proportion of wood resin, he lowered the brightness of the walls and reduced the glare. When Isagi did this, the light reflectivity changed, and the color in the rooms became warm and not too dazzling. He continued to talk about the line of his workshop with great enthusiasm. In addition, the guy also wanted to create an antique atmosphere in the house, so he laid one wall with bricks. Isagi was fascinated by the story of how he built the workshop. Mercia just listened to his story and smiled warmly at the sight of him. Then the girl, with a sweet smile, congratulated the guy on the completion of the building. After all, he finally had a suitable workshop for his experiments and research. Mercia was happy for him. Isagi accepted the girl's congratulations with a smile and thanked her for it. Then the boy approached Mercy's face. The girl blushed from such close contact. Isagi, not paying attention to this, happily informed her that now he could conduct research as much as he wanted. The girl was embarrassed by his closeness, so with a red face she quickly turned away from him. She embarrassedly offered the guy to help him with the arrangement of furniture. Isagi agreed to her help. Then the boy remembered something. Isagi asked the black-haired girl to also put a bed in the workshop for him, so he could take a nap there. However, Mercia immediately refused to fulfill his request for a bed in the workshop. The guy was stunned by her immediate refusal of his request. He wanted to know the reason for her lightning-fast refusal. Then Mercia explained to him with a dark look that if she put a bed in his workshop, he would always sleep in that place so as not to bother himself. The girl knew that he would become too lazy to go into the house. Isagi was stunned by her explanation, but he couldn't find any arguments to deny all of this. He could only accept the black-haired girl's words. However, Mercia was resolutely stubborn in this matter. It was precisely in this matter that she could not yield to Isagi. The boy realized that she saw right through him. So the guy wanted to ask the girl, at least not about a bed, but about something else. But Mercia knew what he wanted to ask her. She refused his request to put a sofa in the workshop. Mercia, pouting, told him that she was doing all this for the sake of the boy's healthy lifestyle. Therefore, the girl indignantly pointed out to him that he should go to bed properly in his own house. Isagi, under pressure, awkwardly agreed with the words of the pouting Mercia. He had to accept that he would not be able to sleep in his workshop. Then the guy immediately changed the subject to avoid further pressure from the black-haired girl. He suggested that she start making fertilizer right away. Mercia decided to help him with this. In order to make fertilizer suitable for the soil of Plummenia village, they collected materials from the forests and mines located in the village. Isagi remembered the demonic boar and the underground passage with oars. And finally, on this day, they would make a new fertilizer. The boy held the plant in his hand, and he put it on the table. On their table, all the other materials they needed were already arranged. Mercia brought him a drawing board. To start, they would need 3 types of fertilizer that were originally used by the villagers in Plummenia. The boy looked at the 3 bags of fertilizer on the table. Then Isagi asked Mercia about the result of enhancing the properties of these 3 types of fertilizers from Plummenia village. The girl began to tell her report. She then informed him that the fertilizers from the village of Plummenia were still inferior to the fertilizers produced in the Empire. The girl read this information directly from the document. Detailed data on the progress was compiled in a document that Mercia held, which he then handed to Isagi so that he could read it. Isagi, after carefully reviewing the information in the document, noticed that only the current fertilizer had a limit. The guy looked at the document with tables on which the data was marked with a serious expression. He thought that it would probably be better to cross the fertilizer with another raw material. Mercia, hearing his thought, told him that in that case they would need a lot of time. The guy understood that if he started producing fertilizers from scratch, it could take several years or even more. However, they had all the information with data on fertilizers from the Empire in the document. In addition, they also had a sufficient amount of fine-quality magic stones. The boy showed the black-haired girl the magic stone they had extracted from the monsters with a smile. So he didn't worry about it. The girl looked at Isagi questioningly. After all, they got these magic stones from monsters in the forest, so she didn't think that they were of such good quality. The guy confirmed that the quality of the magic stones was excellent. He then informed her that in the Imperial capital, 1 such magic stone cost as much as 20 silver coins. Mercia was stunned that these magic stones were so expensive, because in their village Plummenia, these magic stones were usually sold for 1 silver coin. Isagi was so shocked by the price of magic stones in their village that the magic stone in his hands fell out. Still shocked by this, the boy called out to the black-haired girl. He then asked her in disbelief about the magic stones, whether they were common things in her village of Plummenia. The girl thoughtfully agreed that magic stones were indeed common things in their village. She also told him that in this area, everyone would have at least 1 magic stone. Isagi was shocked even more by this information. He accepted the girl's answer with a depressed voice. Seeing how the boy wilted at her words, Mercia looked at him with a puzzled look. Then the guy immediately came to his senses. He was already smiling at his reflection in the magic stone. In any case, he would definitely make a high-quality fertilizer out of this magic stone. Isagi confidently told his interlocutor this. Then they resumed their work. First, Isagi wanted to add the magic stone to the fertilizer, so he asked Mercia to prepare pots for this experiment. The girl agreed and went to fulfill his request. Meanwhile, Isagi wanted to put the magic power in order. After that, the guy took the magic stone in his hands, and it immediately soared into the air. In order to make the disordered magic power contained in the stone easier to handle, the boy had to bring it into balance. The magic stone in his hands began to spill out its magic power. At that moment, the magic stone rose even higher. Magic power began to surge out of it. Isagi confidently controlled the flow of magic power in the magic stone. After some time, the magical power in the magic stone calmed down and was put in order. Then Isagi, using the power of alchemy, rid the magic stone of foreign impurities. Soon everything was ready. Above his hand, a magic stone, purified and processed from foreign mixtures, was floating in the air. Isagi looked at the magic stone, ready for use with a smile. By the time the magic stone was cleaned and put in order, Mercia approached the boy with a large number of pots. Isagi thanked the black-haired girl for the pots she brought. The girl was attracted by the magic stone processed by Isagi. It was different in appearance from the others due to the processing and purification from impurities. Mercia looked at the magic stone with interest. The girl noticed that the processed magic stone was really beautiful. The magic stone emitted a pure purple glow. Isagi told her that in the Empire, among the aristocrats, there were people who wore them as jewelry. Mercia stared at the beautiful magic stone with admiring eyes. It was beautiful. The girl wanted to know how else these magic stones could be used. After a while, Mercia watched with inner horror as the guy cold-bloodedly crushed and mixed such beautiful magic stones with fertilizer. Isagi, however, didn't care about their appearance, so he heartlessly destroyed them. However, the guy, noticing her state because of this, still apologized to the black-haired girl. After all, she was so delighted with the beauty of the magic stones. Mercia was a little disappointed because of their destruction. The girl told the boy in a feigned, calm voice that since the magic stone was just a material, she wouldn't worry about it. Although she looked at the pots with a sad look. Then the girl quickly left to bring more pots to Isagi. The boy, continuing to grind the stone, agreed with this. But Isagi still looked with concern at the departing Mercia. He noticed how disappointed the girl was at the destruction of the beautiful magic stone. Her animal ears were drooping in sadness. So Isagi thought of giving her some kind of magic stone jewelry next time. The boy then told himself that this was another reason why he continued to do all this. Isagi continued to grind the ingredients to create a new fertilizer for the soil of Plummenia village. The boy then added ingredients to the magic stone, namely, densely growing grass with a strong reproductive factor, terraria with a strong insect resistance factor, and genjid, which increases biodegradability. Then he mixed them with various materials they collected from the forest. Soon the boy prepared a prototype of the new fertilizer. Mercia, holding a pot in her hands, suggested that the boy immediately test the fertilizer he had created. Next, they marked the pot with a different number, using ink. This was their first experiment, so the number 1 was painted on the pot. Then they filled the pot with soil. They then immediately planted a selectively bred seed of a plant called arugula in the pot's soil. They then covered the seed with more soil and watered it. At that very moment, a sprout appeared in the pot, sprouting from the seed of the arugula plant. Isagi was stunned by the lightning speed of the plant's growth. However, the next moment the plant also continued to grow. Its growth did not stop for a second. Soon, from a sprout, arugula turned into a full-fledged mature plant. Isagi looked with delight at the ripened arugula. Its nutritious bundles were in large quantities due to its rapid growth. The boy, looking at the ripe plant called arugula, noticed with admiration that the arugula had an amazing growth with this fertilizer. Isagi was about to write down the result in the experimental sheet, but to everyone's surprise, the arugula plant did not stop there. The arugula continued to grow, and it grew so much that it was taller than the boy and the girl. Isagi watched this with delighted shock. The arugula was very tall. The plant reached enormous sizes of several meters. Now its stems were different from its usual appearance. They were too thick due to rapid growth and nutrition. The pot immediately began to shake from such lightning-fast growth. Mercia looked at the plant with astonishing growth and amazement. She and the boy watched as the arugula began to reach the ceiling, and its branches began to grip the wooden boards on the ceiling. Mercia worriedly informed Isagi that if the arugula plant grew any more, the walls and ceiling of the workshop would simply collapse. The boy immediately became afraid of this. Then Isagi ran quickly to the pot with the arugula plant. The next moment, he aimed his palm straight at the base of the plant's stem. At the same time, the boy knocked over the pot. At that moment, Isagi applied magic power to the plant, destroying its base so that it would stop growing completely, so that the plant would not destroy the house. Then he quickly pushed the entire plant, which he had destroyed with the power of alchemy, onto the floor right off the table. Isagi realized with horror that this was dangerous. He looked at the plant he had knocked over with a gloomy face. Out of curiosity, the boy had almost destroyed his newly built workshop. The girl then pointed out that they had never imagined the plant to grow so much. Mercia thought that it was all because of the strong factor of the densely growing grass. It was possible, but Eir thought that it was also because of the synergy effect of the good quality magic power. This was their first failed experiment. If that was the case, then Isagi would like to try extracting the magic power from the magic stone. Also, it seemed like there was a need to choose a suitable magic stone if he wanted to see the result of the mixture of raw materials brewed. In order to create the most suitable fertilizer for the soil of Plummenia village, all he had to do was try all of these things one by one. The boy stood thoughtfully, looking at the plant grown on the failed fertilizer he had created. Then Isagi told the girl with a smile that this job with fertilizers would definitely not be easy, but they had to try hard to get a good result. Meanwhile, Mercia was cleaning up the failed arugula plant. She supported the boy's words with a warm smile. Mercia, holding a pot of plants in her hands, hoped that she would be useful to him in creating fertilizer for the village of Plummenia. Some time passed. It was already raining outside. The boy and the girl were still in the workshop, despite the weather. They again marked the pot with a distinctive number plate. This was their second experiment. Isagi planted the arugula seeds again in a pot with a different fertilizer. However, the result was the same as in the previous experiment. The plant called arugula grew to enormous sizes again. Isagi knew what to do with such an outcome. After some more time, this was already the guy's 73rd experiment. Now the result was the opposite, although the plant grew to normal size, but at that very moment it withered and died. Because of which, Isagi was upset. The next experiment with fertilizers did not please them either. They had already planted another plant, namely a plant called sweet pepper. Although its fruits appeared, they also withered along with the plant. Mercia was worried about this. Some time passed. It was already late evening outside. It was dark. However, the boy and girl were still in the workshop and were toiling away at experiments to create the perfect fertilizer. The numbers of their experiment had already crossed the double-digit number. These were already their 200th experiments. The girl was again gluing distinctive signs onto clay pots. Meanwhile, Isagi sat at his desk. The guy tiredly and tensely wrote new fertilizer recipes, calculating the shortcomings of past experiments. Numerous crumpled sheets of paper accumulated on his desk. Then he looked up from creating new fertilizer recipes for a moment. Isagi looked up with a tired smile, not looking at a specific point. This kind of work, when he and Mercia persistently repeated experiments to improve something, reminded him of the time when they lived in the Empire. The boy was caught up in a little nostalgia from this memory, but then he still had to continue improving the fertilizer recipes. After some time, they started a new experiment again. On the experimental table were broken pots with failed experiments. The boy and girl planted the same pepper seed in a new pot. Then Mercia carefully began to pour water on the pot with the planted seed. She and Isagi were tense about the possibility of an error. The boy was ready to remove the failed experiment with alchemy. At that very moment, after watering the soil, the seed grew and immediately turned into a sprout. This is already their 252nd experiment with fertilizer. Isagi and Mercia watched the sprout with tense eyes. They were ready. Soon the sweet pepper sprout grew into a full-fledged plant with its own ripe fruits. The plant looked wonderful, and the fruits, in the form of sweet peppers, looked fully ripe and juicy. Isagi and Mercia were stunned to notice that the plant's growth had stopped. Mercia informed him that the stem and leaves of the plant also showed no abnormal growth. It could also be confirmed that the result of this plant was the same as the fertilizer from the Empire. This meant only one thing. Isagi leaned against the table, stunned and silent. He quietly said, with some shock and disbelief, that everything was ready. Then the boy, with tears in his eyes, which appeared from joy, picked up the pot with the successful experiment. They had finally succeeded in their experiment with fertilizer. It cost them 3 whole weeks of selfless work. They were able to create fertilizer using only materials from the village, which meant they would no longer have a problem with fertilizer shortages. Isagi happily and loudly agreed with the black-haired girl's words. Now the village's agriculture will also be safe. However, the boy immediately sank. He realized that there were no alchemists in the village except him. If something happened to him, the production of fertilizers might stop. Then Mercia suggested that the boy give the recipe for the fertilizer to the city's alchemists so that they could make fertilizer for them, but Isagi was not sure that they would be able to repeat it due to their lack of skill in alchemy. So Mercia excitedly suggested another option to the boy, namely, to come up with an easier recipe. However, Isagi was also not sure about this. The boy did not know how skilled the city's alchemists were. There was silence in the room for a moment. Mercia was dejected because she had not found the right way out of the situation. Isagi was thoughtful. The guy was thinking about a solution. However, there was no solution, so the boy and girl put the issue off until later. They didn't want to think about complicated things. The fertilizer came out on their 250-second experiment. Early the next day, Isagi thanked the girl for the food she had prepared. The vegetables they had been treated to were delicious. Mercia also agreed with this. The boy took the dirty dishes to the sink. The girl was washing the dishes at the time. Then Isagi decided to help her with washing the dishes. The guy started washing the dishes. Mercia thanked him for his help. Isagi noticed that when he and Mercia were doing something together, their conversation would sometimes turn into an awkward pause. However, for some reason the boy did not feel any awkwardness with her because of this. Isagi, at this thought, continued washing the dishes with a warm smile. Then he wanted to say something to the girl. Isagi told Mercia that when they stood like this next to each other and did household chores, they looked like a married couple. The girl immediately shuddered at his words, her face instantly turning red. Mercia, her face flushed, turned away from the boy with worry. She repeated the words about the married couple with embarrassment. The girl began to stutter from embarrassment and timidly wanted to say something to the boy. But her next words were interrupted by a knock on the door of their house. The one who knocked on their door was looking for the alchemist Isagi. The guy told the girl that he would open the door, and she should continue washing the dishes. Then Isagi noticed that Mercia was terribly displeased about something. Her expression had taken on a gloomy look, and her cattail was wagging furiously in anger. However, Mercia told him in a gloomy voice that everything was fine. Isagi was already approaching the door. At the same time, he was thinking that Mercia was unhappy because the black-haired girl did not like washing dishes. Then Isagi opened the door to the stranger. Soon, a bag appeared in front of him. Isagi did not notice anyone. He thought with surprise that there was no one. However, to his surprise, the guy was called from below. It was a girl of dwarf stature. She was also of the beast race. The girl carried a huge and heavy backpack on her back. The boy, seeing her, realized that she was a human of the beast race, namely, of the dog race. Also noticing her small stature, he thought that she was a child. Then the girl happily introduced herself to him. Her name was Konya. She was from the trading company Wonderful. Konya came to him for important negotiations with a guy, namely with Isagi. Isagi was surprised that they wanted to negotiate with him. The girl happily confirmed this. Then she asked his permission to negotiate and discuss the details of the case in his house. The guy realized this, so he allowed the girl to enter the house and escorted her to the reception area. The girl apologized to him for invading his house. Then Konya, quickly climbing the front stairs, tried to enter the house. At the same time, the girl did not try to take off her huge backpack. That's why her huge and completely full backpack prevented her from entering Isagi's house. The girl tried to enter the room with all her might, but Isagi informed her that this backpack would not fit through his front door. Because of this, Konya had to leave her huge and full backpack outside the house. It just lay alone on the ground. Then, having already sat down on the chair, she apologized to them for the inconvenience. Konya wanted to say something else to Isagi and the black-haired girl. However, she did not know the girl's name, so there was a moment of silence in the room. The girl couldn't figure out how to address her interlocutor. Mercia was surprised by the long look Konya gave her. Then Konya asked the boy with admiration if Mercia was his wife, which shocked the girl with this sudden question. The boy immediately responded to Konya with excitement that this girl was his servant, and also the daughter of the village chief. Mercia, on the other hand, was shaking all over from the emotions that overwhelmed her. Then Konya awkwardly apologized to the girl for her question. However, Mercia, with a happy smile, told her not to worry about it. Then she informed everyone that she would go and make tea for everyone. Isagi noticed that the girl was happily humming a tune as she left. He was surprised that Mercia was in a good mood. After all, just recently she was angry and dissatisfied about something, and was in a bad mood. The guy was thoughtful because of the quick and changing mood of Mercia. A woman's heart was still a mystery to him. The girl with a smile, holding a tray, walked away from them towards the kitchen. Soon Mercia brought them the tea she had prepared. Konya looked at the tea the girl had made with amazement. Then the company, consisting of Isagi, Mercia, and Konya, had a fun time. Konya was flattered by the tea. After Konya, the dog race took the cup in her hands and tasted the tea that the girl had prepared. Konya told them with delight that in addition to the bitterness, there was a subtle sweetness to the tea, so it was quite tasty. Konya wanted to know what Mercia used for the tea. It turned out that she brewed wolfberry leaves collected from a nearby forest. The girl was delighted with this information. Konya immediately wrote down in her notebook about the tea made from wolfberry leaves. If you brew them, you will get such a wonderful taste. Konya wanted them, then buy them. The girl quickly wrote down the information she received in a notebook. Isagi was stunned by the fact that the girl suddenly pulled out a notebook from somewhere. While the girl was busy writing down information about wolfberry leaves, Isagi whispered to Mercia about the wonderful trading company. The guy wanted to know what kind of company it was. Mercia explained to him that Wonderful was an outstanding large trading company, even in the Beast Kingdom. Not only did they have their main office in the royal capital, but they also had branches in various cities. All of their employees were half-humans of the dog race. The guy was stunned that they were quite a large company. He did not understand why a businesswoman named Konya from such a large company would come to him. Soon the girl wrote down all the information in her notebook. The girl slammed her notebook shut, then she apologized to them for the wait. Konya informed them that she had in fact recently noticed a sharp increase in the amount of high-quality crops in the markets. The boy, along with Mercia, were stunned by her words. Konya noted with admiration that these crops had a high growth rate and could be harvested regardless of the season. Moreover, they were much tastier than the crops that had been grown in the animal kingdom until now. Her attempts to find out the origin of this amazing crop led her straight to the village of Plummenia. The girl had to travel a long way to get to this place. Mercia realized that she was talking about the harvest of Plummenia village. Isagi also realized the reason for her appearance. Since the harvest in this village has increased recently, the merchants must have gone to other villages to trade. That's how Konya learned that Isagi was the source of the increased harvest. The girl agreed with the guy's words. Her tail wagged furiously from the intense emotions. It was just strange to her that the crops of Plummenia village were grown in other villages, but they could not achieve the same result. However, for Isagi, this was a natural result. Konya was shocked by his answer. Isagi then explained to her that he had developed these crops using alchemy specifically for the soil of this area. Although they were easy to grow, it would be difficult to achieve the same quality in other places. Konya realized that it was all in the soil. The fact that they used alchemy for agriculture was surprising to her. They used the power of alchemy to select crops. The girl carefully wrote down this information in her notebook. Isagi agreed with Konya's words. Konya continued to write everything down in her notebook. As expected of a businesswoman of a large trading company, Konya was quick to grasp information, and she also had a well-developed imagination. Soon the girl finished writing all the information in her notebook, then she closed her notebook. Now she wanted to get down to the main topic of the negotiations. Konya asked Isagi if he could sell his harvest wholesale to the wonderful trading company on a regular basis. The boy, along with Mercia, was surprised by the girl's offer. Then he realized that unfortunately, the resources that could be gathered around the village were not unlimited. The connections with a large trading company were important to them, so the guy wasn't against the offer, but he had conditions for it. Konya wanted to hear his conditions for the negotiations. Isagi then informed her that he was an alchemist. Therefore, if he did not have the materials, creation would be impossible for him. He needed them to deliver the materials he wanted on a priority basis. The girl, in response to his condition about delivering the materials he wanted for alchemy, merely nodded to them and smiled calmly. She told him with a proud smile that it was no problem for them. With the capabilities of the wonderful trading company, there was no material they couldn't get from the Beast Kingdom. Then Isagi asked the girl about alchemy materials outside the empire. Konya turned away from the boy awkwardly. After all, she couldn't guarantee that. The guys had no more questions. Konya asked how much Mercia and Isagi would be able to sell wholesale stably. This is a rather important question that should be given attention, because trade depends on it. The guys prepared for this question and drew up a document that talks about the current harvest volume. This will significantly reduce the conversation time and structure the conversation about trade. Konya began to study the weekly yields closely. She asked about how much of the harvest they would be able to supply. This is, one might say, the most important question of all. Mercia, full of confidence, said that nothing was impossible for Mr. Isagi's improved varieties, and the volume of work would be equal to the volume of supplies. Konya was amazed at the dedication of the boys to this business. It was obvious how eager they were to start trading. The girl was pleasantly surprised by the amazing speed, because the guys have the opportunity to send cargo every week. She asked whether it was possible to increase the volume of supplies so that the work would be even more efficient. Isagi thought about it. After all, it is difficult to increase the actual volume, because at the moment the only workforce left is golems, and the guys themselves. If they work even harder in the fields, they won't have any strength left for anything. He thinks about how they can combine the production of one type of fertilizer, the selection of varieties, and the manufacture of magical instruments. And it's still too early for him to devote himself to work like a real farmer. Before that, he still had a lot to do, and the time for such a serious matter had not yet come. In that case, Konya suggested hiring people to manage the fields. That would certainly make the job easier. Isagi and Mercia repeated the words spoken. It literally took them a few moments to realize that it was really fashionable to do this. They had never thought that part of the work could be delegated to someone else. Isagi wondered why such a simple thought had not occurred to him. It was probably because he was one of those who were forced to work until exhaustion. He had never thought that it could actually be done. The girl found Konya's idea brilliant. She thinks that Isagi should focus on studying alchemy and delegate the work in the fields to other people. That way, they will be able to breed even more varieties of different vegetables and fruits. He clenched his hand into a fist. Now Isagi himself is determined. He intends to do as Konya said. The guy is going to make the free land a big field. This will be a big breakthrough in their work. Konya suggested that the large field would be set aside for a farm. Isagi and Mercia thought again. It seemed that another simple idea had not reached them this time either. But there was nothing to worry about. The main thing was that they had learned about it. The three of them sat at a table in the middle of a vast and endless field. Isagi realized that improving an entire farm sounded very good. This will help him not only to establish trade, but also to develop the cultivation of new varieties himself. Isagi is already imagining how he will grow a lot of crops on a huge farm and send the goods for sale. And Konya is already looking forward to how the company Wonderful will sell these goods everywhere. The aura from Isagi and Konya, which was burning with a thirst for profit, repelled Mercia. It seems that the girl has already realized how much work awaits them. Konya extends her palm to the guy and wishes his big farm prosperity. Now from this moment on, the guy is looking forward to working with the trading company. Mercia was glad that everything ended this way. Now they will have even more opportunities and time to grow new plants. The guy wondered what to do with the staff now. He was thinking of hiring contract workers from the trading company. Wonderful! This would certainly make some of their tasks easier, but it was still worth looking for a few more ways to solve this problem. Still, this wasn't the best idea, and the guy decided to try recruiting workers in the village first. He feels that people will have to be asked if there aren't enough people from the village. Then a girl came up and handed the guy a glass of drink. Isagi asks her if the villagers will respond to the job posting as usual. Of course, this question worried the guy a lot, since he didn't know how everything would turn out. After all, the food situation in the village has improved significantly lately. The guy wonders if there will be people willing to work on his farm right now, even though people can feed themselves. The girl is firmly convinced that people will always be found. After all the residents feel great gratitude towards the guy. He did a lot of good deeds for the residents, and taught them different things. Isagi wants the people who work on his farm to feel that it will be beneficial for them. The girl realized how generous and caring her master is towards others. He takes a drink in his hands, and the warmth of the glass warms his hands. The girl notices that her master has a kind heart. She believes that in order to make a profit, it is possible to create varieties that the guy has not yet distributed to the villagers. Then they will have just the incentive to at least attend a job interview. After all, it would be nice if there was a possibility to create varieties that could only be bred in a specific place. And if the locals could take them for themselves, they would certainly be happy. The girl suggested planting fruits such as apples and bananas. A few seconds later, the girl with glowing eyes suggested planting grapes. It was obvious how much she wanted to try these berries. Isagi apologized and said that the grapes were still in the development stage. The girl was very upset when she heard this news, and then the guy realized that she really loved grapes. She did not answer this and only asked to be informed when the grapes could be improved. Isagi is thinking about where to start his business. They have quite a lot of work ahead of them, which requires order and a certain structure. He needs 5 workers. The volume of transactions and profit are still unclear. The guy is going to set a goal to test the work with a small group of people. Later, the main income will increase because there is enough work. The girl told the guy that she was going to go to her father for permission to recruit people for work and left. Isagi sincerely wishes that everything goes very smoothly. After all, a large farm is a lot of work. 5 days had passed since Isagi had posted the recruitment notices. He was reading a book when a girl suddenly interrupted him with an important news story. Mercia ran into the room, trying to catch her breath. Isagi asked if anyone had responded to the recruitment requests. The girl was shocked. As it turned out, they had a flood of applications. They had collected more than 10 times the number of workers required. A huge crowd of people gathered at the guy's house, wanting to try themselves in this business and work on the farm. No one expected that such a huge number of people would want to go to an interview. A crowd of people gathered at the entrance to the house. The guys clearly didn't expect such an influx of people applying for jobs. The very first candidate turned out to be a mutual friend of Isagi and Mercia. It turned out that it was Nea, who, as it turned out, also applied. The girl thinks that it is quite funny, and the salary is always a good thing, which very few people will refuse if they have an interesting job. Nea noticed that there were quite a lot of candidates. Isagi admitted that he really wants to hire everyone who wants to work there. But he has no choice but to narrow down the number of candidates by conducting interviews. Here, Nea caught Isagi's attention. Her expression became insanely cute, like a kitten. She was asking the guy if they were friends. The girl was hinting that she should work on the farm. Right there, in an instant, Mercia appeared behind the girl, her gaze clearly not promising anything good. The girl pacified the job candidate with just one look in a matter of seconds, and she immediately felt somehow awkward. The girl said that the interview was being conducted without exception, pushed the girl aside and asked her to stand in line. The girl's argument reached the guy's ears, and he felt a little awkward listening to their conversations. However, Isagi did not think that there would be so many people who wanted to work on his farm. He could not even imagine that there would be so many people willing. This could not but please, because in such a situation he would undoubtedly assemble a team. Now it was time to begin the interview. Isagi apologized to the people for waiting and got to work. He and Mercy had quite a lot of work ahead of them, because they had to analyze absolutely every candidate for a job. Isagi listened attentively to everyone who came to tell about their candidacy. He could not leave without attention even the smallest detail, because each moment was important in its own way for hiring to work at Isagi's farm. The next day, some of the boys were called to the farm. They guessed that the fact that they were called again could mean that they were accepted for work. This could not but please, because they were the few who managed to pass the selection. Among those chosen were 5 guys who were happy that they had successfully passed the interview. However, not everyone managed to do so. Many went to the interview without getting hired. Naya, hearing this, rushed to embrace Mercia with mad joy. Mercia, in turn, was not very happy with the tenderness, but did not refuse. She only stood reservedly next to the newly elected worker. Isagi, despite the fact that the guys most likely already know each other, asked them to introduce themselves. This, as is usually the case, is one of the most important steps for further work in any company among people. Naya gave her name and said that she used to help her grandfather with the work in the fields. This was a huge plus to her qualities, which were important for hiring, because experience is always considered an advantage. Isagi recalls how Naya masterfully helped them with the work in the field last time. She can definitely be relied upon in work matters. She will undoubtedly be able to prompt and give very useful advice if the situation requires it. Rhodes turned out to be the son of a beekeeper. He is completely confident in his endurance and strength. As it turns out, he has no experience in agriculture, but thanks to his strength, he can be safely trusted with physical work. Nora helped out on her father's large farm and with the bookkeeping at her mother's general store. Nora is certainly not as physically strong as the other workers, but she is good at numbers and can handle small tasks and office work well. Ricardo was a hunter. He also did some field work, using the seeds he got from Isagi. Of all the villagers, Ricardo planted the most seeds from Isagi. He seems to have an idea of how to work on a farm. Ragmont has as much experience in farming as Ricardo. He wasn't sure if the guy really wanted to hire him too. Ragmont does not understand why he was hired if he said many rude words to Isagi during the banquet. The guy explained that this was why he wanted to hire him. Isagi assumes that Ragmont will be able to ask him questions without embarrassment. Now the man guesses what the matter is. He asks that in that case he be allowed to directly question Isagi, since that would be his duty. The man's straightforwardness was also appreciated. Mercia brought rakes, hoes, and scythes. Now she asks the workers to help with the harvest. Naya asked about what they would need to harvest now. No one could imagine how much work actually awaited them. The girl began to read from the list of vegetables they had to pick today. The list included tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, bell peppers, and Chinese cabbage. In fact, there are many more vegetables and fruits growing on the farm. The girl didn't have time to finish voicing the list when suddenly Naya asked whether it wasn't too much to collect in just one day. The girl explained that this was the very reason she wanted the workers to help them. Merciechka reminded that despite the hard work, the salary is quite high. Moreover, she and Isagi do not object if the guys want to take part of the harvest with them. These are very favorable conditions. Mercia placed her hand on Nia's shoulder and smiled. It was as if she was benevolently urging them to do their best. It was a smile that suggested the workers simply had no other choice. All the workers were stunned by the girl's aura and hurried to get to work. It seemed to them that in such a state of affairs, it was better to properly perform their duties and observe all the prescribed rules and conditions of work. Mercia approached Isagi and asked him to focus on the work in the workshop and leave the rest to her. The guy had no choice but to agree. He respects Mercia completely and cannot take her seriousness so lightly. Here the boys started working in the field. Everyone got down to the business they had been interviewed for. Mercia explained in great detail how to work with each of the tools the workers had received. Everyone listened attentively to the girl's explanations. They were pleased and interested in learning something new. Mercia explained in detail to Ragmont how to handle a knife and pick cabbage. He listened, holding a cabbage in both hands. While Naya was walking to her place of work, she saw an apple tree with fruits. Her eyes immediately sparkled, but she felt awkward picking even one apple, since Mercia was standing a few steps away. After all, they would be able to get their share of fruits and vegetables later after work. The guys work hard. Some of them have found that the work is really hard. However, those who have a lot of strength and endurance, it did not cause any difficulties. While the boys worked in the field, Isagi concentrated on the produce in the workshop. He realized that the fruit still needed time to ripen. Now he can devote much more time to this, thanks to the new workers. As it turned out, strawberries, apples, and bananas turned out to be great. But in order to grow them on a large farm, it is necessary to increase the number of varieties a little more, to increase their survival rate and resistance to external conditions. If things continue like this, the workshop will need to be expanded. While he was thinking these thoughts, the boy noticed Mercia working in the field. Isagi realizes that the girl helps him cope with housework, workshop, and even farm work. The girl always tries too hard. Here, Isagi suddenly remembered how the girl had asked about grapes. She had been so engrossed in talking about them that for a moment she had forgotten herself in dreams of bunches of large and sweet berries. He understands that it will take quite a long time to grow grapes. Isagi is going to try. He is determined to finish the work on developing and growing new varieties of vegetables and fruits to the end. Isagi strains his back. It seems that the work in the workshop is finished, as evidenced by the stacks of written sheets, which in some places lay chaotically on all the surfaces of the workshop. He understands that soon, everyone should wake up. Isagi realizes that the workers had a hard time on the first day. He wonders if he can somehow thank them for their work. Suddenly, an idea comes to mind. Isagi rushed to the cabinet, thinking that he had a little more time. He was going to make a magical tool that would masterfully improve the working conditions on the farm. When the boy was in the castle, in his free time, he worked on writing plans for magical instruments. His notes are only sketches, but if all this is combined, it will be possible to create something useful for all workers. And there is a shortage of materials, so some ideas cannot even be simply implemented. Some notes only had drawings and schematic images of the proposed inventions, so it will be problematic to recreate them. Isagi interrupts his notes and, unexpectedly even for himself, finds one thing. He found a drawing of a tool with a description that could help in the invention of this device. Work in the field was suspended. Nea stretched her arms forward. It was clear without words how tired she was from work. All the boys felt how hard work on the farm was, and what a colossal effort it required. All the boys gathered in the room, they could barely say a few words. Everyone was resting after working hard in the field. Mercia praises the workers and says that they all worked hard. Ragman admitted that he hadn't been this tired in a long time, and Ricard noted that he had worked much harder today than he had on his own field. No one was prepared for this amount of work, but everyone could imagine how hard it was. Rhodes, despite being terribly tired, was still very happy that he and the boys had managed to get a lot of vegetables. After all, for their work they would receive, in addition to a decent payment, some of the fruit they had collected. Ragman looked at Nora. It seemed to him that the girl was not tired at all. Nora lowered her head and exhaled. In fact, she was very tired and said that she exists only due to feminine energy. The man didn't quite understand what she was talking about. Nora, with her last breath, said that she did this every day. Her fake laughter didn't sound cheerful at all. After all, such hard work wasn't quite suitable for a little girl. Isagi enters the room and thanks the guys for their work. He asks them to sit down for a while in order to show one thing. The guys obeyed and began to listen attentively to the guy. They were all very interested. Isagi holds out an object covered with a cloth. He says that this thing is a gift for his workers. The guy is very happy that he will be able to brighten up the guy's working days in some way. Everyone was surprised and looked closely at the still unknown object. Isagi removes the cloth and presents the guys with the test mixer number 1. The guy was very proud of his invention and intends to demonstrate the principle of its operation visually. The guys didn't quite understand what the point of this object was and what it was needed for. Isagi explained that it was a magical tool. His work would really surprise the workers, and the result would really change the way they looked at fruits and vegetables. The guy starts explaining that the bottom base contains a magical fragment without attributes, and if you let the flow of magical power, the blade at the top will start to rotate. The workers thought the guy was speaking in an incomprehensible language. Mercia brought some chopped fruit on a board and put it into the mixer. The guy is going to add water and put in some magic power to make the magic device work and get one thing. The mixer started making a very loud noise and grinding the vegetables that were inside. Nea was shocked that precious vegetables would be used in this way. She considered it a wrong attitude towards fruits and vegetables. The guy didn't hear anything from all the girls' screams. Isagi asked Nea to calm down and just look at what had come out in the end. What the guy had come up with only caused surprise on the workers' faces. Isagi handed the glass of freshly squeezed apple juice to the boys. All the workers were shocked that Isagi could make apple juice from just 2 ingredients. They thought it was something supernatural. The guy asked the kids who wanted to drink. Everyone immediately stretched out their hands in a desire to try the juice as soon as possible. They were already very tired after working on the farm, and now they had the opportunity to try a new thirst-quenching drink. Everyone appreciated the taste of the drink. The image of shiny, juicy apples dripping with juice immediately appeared in the head. Juicy fruits reflecting bright sunlight immediately transferred the children to warm sensations. Nea, Rhodes, and Ricardo were simply delighted that such a wonderful drink with a rich apple sweetness was obtained from ordinary apples and water. The taste of the drink was simply superb. Isagi winked at the boys. He was very glad that they liked the drink. Suddenly, Nora and Ragman appear behind the guy with empty glasses. They also wanted to try such a wonderful drink. Isagi asked the two to wait. He was going to wash the dishes first. To make the drink easier to drink this time, he added milk instead of water. Milk is much softer, but this requires changing the ingredients themselves, which add an unusual taste. So Isagi will make banana and strawberry milk. The new drinks themselves are unusual. No one could even dream of something like this before. Nora and Ragman began to try the new drinks. Nora felt the aroma and sweetness of bright strawberries and how they spread throughout her body. The girl suddenly felt happy. The drink inspired her so much that it seemed as if the girl would fly right now. The boy's fatigue vanished as if by magic. Ragman also appreciated the drink. He felt how it gave him strength. Naya admitted that this was the first time she had drunk such delicious juice. Ricardo felt like he was ready to fight tomorrow after such juice. He intended to harvest even more than today. All workers were once again convinced that the quality of working conditions remained at the highest level. The guy was very happy that the kids liked the juice, and his efforts were worth it. Naya notices that the banana milk looks delicious and wants to try it too. Isagi agrees, but first he needs to wash the bottle again. Mercia listened to their conversations with a smile. She is glad that Isagi found a common language with the guys so easily. Mercia did not expect anything else from the gentleman. Isagi did not understand at first what was being discussed. Mercia assumed that the guy had a certain tactic: to get workers hooked on tasty fruits so that they couldn't escape. The girl noted that the gentleman was good at the carrot and stick method. Isagi didn't even think about it. However, it would be really great if the kids had at least a little fun working on the farm. Mercia agreed with this idea. She completely shares the guy's opinion. The girl thinks exactly the same as her master. Suddenly, Isagi hands over a glass of drink to Mercy. The guy guessed that the girl was also tired and had not tried the drinks yet. He specially grabbed a glass and suggested that they try it together before treating the others. It seems Isagi has prepared some completely different drink. His imagination and ingenuity have no limits. Mercia smiled softly. They clinked their glasses and decided to drink the drink to the bottom for their efforts on such a difficult day. On this sunny day, Mercia asks Isagi to check and tidy up the agricultural crops as usual. The boy did not object. He is calm about the girl's instructions because she always helps him. It's been a month and a half since he and the boys started working on the farm. With 5 workers and Mercia, their farm is finally operating at full capacity. All the results of the work are bearing fruit, and everyone is noticing it. Their farm had become very large. It included a zone of ordinary fields, a plantation of medicinal plants, wheat fields, and an orchard. All of this was simply necessary for the full functioning of the farm. The company has grown to such a large scale that it can now definitely be called huge. The large number of plots and plantations, not to mention the countless fields, simply could not leave anyone indifferent. Isagi understands that with such a scale, it is becoming increasingly difficult to make a detour. But then an idea came to his mind. He asked the girl to wait. He needed just a little time to bring his idea to life. The guy explains that he had a good idea. He got refined copper and invented a copper horse with it. The invention was no different from a real animal. This horse turned out to be a golem. He thought that it would be convenient to have a means of transportation. Now, for going around and inspecting such large areas, there is a very convenient transport that solves the issue of time and effort. The girl sincerely thanked the gentleman because he had helped her out so much. Isagi decides to create a second such horse so that the two of them could go around together. As it turned out, there weren't enough materials for a second horse. They had to make the rounds on one horse. Mercia was very surprised by this news. The girl did not hold on to the guy when she was riding. She was very awkward. Isagi asked to hold on tightly because riding without holding on to anything was very dangerous. Mercia, her face reddening, grabbed the guy's jacket with her hand. She was very pleased to be so close to the gentleman. The guy suddenly turned around and noticed someone purring behind him. He asked the girl if she was doing it. Mercia only turned away in response and said that the guy had simply imagined it. She leaned her head against Isagi's shoulder. Isagi wondered what kind of sound it was in that case. It was much more convenient to make the rounds on the copper horse because it goes very fast, and this allows the guys to save much more time than they would have spent checking everything on foot. Isagi and Mercia arrived at Rhodes. He worked on the site with the golems. He didn't expect to see the boys and wished them a good morning. Rhodes always does his job properly and doesn't give any reason to doubt it. The guy said that he came to check the farm a little and settle things and asked not to worry about him. Rhodes understood everything and did not interfere. The guy approached one of the greenhouses. He notices that Promeno House is able to control the temperature properly. It is covered with a translucent film, and it controls the temperature with magical equipment. The guy thinks that it is worth slowing down the growth rate of plants and letting them grow slowly. After all, the optimal growth rate of fruits and vegetables is also an important part. He carefully examines each bush and measures the fruits. Mercia notices that the guy is truly an amazing person. But, as it turned out, Isagi didn't hear anything. But as soon as he asked the girl about it, she said that she didn't say anything and just turned away. She looked out the window. She thinks that creating such a large farm in the village is really not something that everyone can do. That is why she thinks that her master is a truly amazing person who can become an example. Once Isagi had checked everything, he said that they needed to go to the orchard. All the fields on the farm needed to be thoroughly inspected. This was necessary in order to detect any undesirable phenomena in the process of growing vegetables and fruits in time. Suddenly, Nea runs up to Isagi. She shouts that something has happened to the orchard. The girl can't get her breathing under control. This sign alone can indicate that the matter is very urgent. The girl, instead of explaining anything, led them along. This is still the best decision. After all, literally every second counts, and it is simply impossible to postpone such news. The boys came to the orchard and saw that all the fruits were broken and spoiled. Watermelon rinds lay haphazardly on the field, and the pulp of these berries was scattered in torn pieces almost all over the space. Isagi and Mercia were horrified by what they saw. They couldn't understand how such an incident could have happened. No one could even put their minds to it, because such a thing can only happen in the most exceptional situations, which can be counted on the fingers of one hand. The fruit looked as if a storm had passed through them, sweeping them across the field and then throwing them to the ground with such force that they shattered into pieces. But that would hardly be a natural disaster. Isagi asks Nei if the same thing happened yesterday. The girl shakes her head and says that nothing like that happened yesterday. The sky is still clear outside, and there was no reason for rain, much less a storm, and it has been quite a while. She reported that when she finished work, everything was as usual. But when the morning came, everything became so terrible. Nea could hardly hold back her tears. It was hard for her to realize that she allowed such a terrible thing to happen. The boy asked if there was any more rotten fruit. The girl refused and replied that the fruit was only rotten in this place. However, this didn't make it any easier for Naya, because the watermelon field was under her responsibility. The boy breathed a sigh of relief. He realized that he was very lucky that only the watermelons had gone bad. After all, if other fields had suffered, the farm would have suffered colossal damage that would have taken a long time to restore. Nea folded her hands into fists in front of her. She's shaking all over and bursting into tears, asking the guy for forgiveness. She did not expect that such a big disaster could happen in the field. Now she feels guilty for not keeping an eye on the harvest. Isagi noticed how the girl was worried about the harvest. Mercia began to calm her down and say that it was not her fault. Isagi confirms this, saying that the fields cannot be watched even at night. First, Isagi decided to collect everything that was damaged. The girls agreed to help. There are spoiled fruits in wooden boxes, and insects are flying above them. Isagi looked at the fruits and wondered why this could happen. Suddenly, the guy noticed claw marks on one of the fruits. And not far from the field, he found traces of wild animals. This can say a lot, and even give a clue as to the reason for the spoilage of such a large amount of the harvest. Now he understands that it was not a human who did this. Mercia confirms this and says that she feels a faint scent of wild animals. Now everything has become crystal clear to the boys. They understand who the culprit is. Suddenly, Nea distracts them and asks them to come over to see something. She has found something that can confirm with some accuracy the guy's guess about the guilt of the wild animals. As it turned out, the girl found a black tuft of wool. The guy suggested that it might be a black wolf. These strong animals cause a lot of trouble. After all, they are wild animals that find their food by their own efforts. Nea was surprised that the boy understood this just by touching a piece of wool. He said that he was good at calculating information about materials. Isagi skillfully disassembled the material that the girl found. Mercia assumed that the wild animals on the watermelon pane were attracted by the sweet aroma of the fruit and came down from the mountains during the night. Naya was worried that this might happen again today. Mercia said that it would definitely happen again. Like bears that once tasted human flesh, would attack and ruin their lives again. The example was very creepy, but quite real and convincing. Naya is even more scared by this information. She wonders what they should do now. Wild animals are too dangerous, and giving away the harvest for free will only harm the farm's income and its workers. It is known that the enemy is a nimble monster that is strong in attack. Fighting him in the wide area of the farm would be a bad idea. In this case, the guy suggests performing from the watermelon field, where the fruit was destroyed. The boy asked NEA to call Ragment and Ricardo to protect the farm. However, they do not have to risk their lives for this. The girl obeyed, and immediately ran away as fast as she could. The guy gave the order to the golems to put their work aside for now, because the top priority right now is to protect the farm. He and Mercia need to come up with a clear plan on how to do this, because their common future depends on it. The boy got on his horse. He was going to follow the tracks of wild animals into the forest. Here Mercia jumped on her horse and said that she would definitely go with the master. She believes that Isagi may need help at any moment. Isagi said that he would increase his speed a little, so the girl would need to hold on tight. Mercia had no objections. They were determined to find out the reason why the fruit in the watermelon fields had spoiled. The boys are already far away in the forest. The boy asks the girl if the tracks they found are the same as those in the watermelon field. This was very important to make sure that his guesses made on the farm were correct. The girl confirmed this. She said that these tracks continuously stretched into the depths of the forest. A faint smell of animals remained. All these words only confirmed that wild animals were to blame for the damage to the harvest. And then suddenly Mercia notices that right next to them, a large pack of wild animals is running at great speed. They suddenly found themselves so close that the boys did not expect to find them walking almost side by side. In an instant, the boys found themselves surrounded by wild animals. These beasts turned out to be shadow wolves. The guy was right when he touched a tuft of wool that a worker accidentally found in the field. Isagi thinks that he should have expected this. He should have brought his friends along for backup. He didn't think that they could easily face a pack of wild beasts that were much stronger than humans. The boy asks Mercia if she can handle the shadow wolf. However, the girl is only half sure of this. The girl, in turn, is still full of confidence. She is definitely ready to stand up for herself and her master. Here, Isagi realizes that this enemy is so strong that even Mercia does not know if he can defeat him. According to his battle tactics, helping him will increase their chances of victory. But the black wolves will not allow this to happen. He carefully pulls his hand out of the glove. Mercia appears in front of the guy and says that she will buy time, and at that moment he will have to run away. The girl made a very bold decision. Isagi was shocked by what the girl said. He did not expect that Mercia would make such a bold decision, knowing that she could be left alone in the forest among wild animals. He said with rage on his face that he would not be able to leave her and run away. The guy understands that this is irrational, but as the only man, he cannot leave Mercia. Isagi thinks that he simply has no right to do this. He grabs the girl by the shoulders and says that she supported him even after he was kicked out of the Imperial castle. Isagi says that even if he got into trouble again, it doesn't mean that he can leave her. The guy believes that he simply has to be with Mercia in such most dangerous moments, because they are much stronger that way. Mercia was touched by these words. However, such a touching moment was interrupted by the wolf's evil laughter. The boys immediately turned their attention to the source of the laughter. They did not immediately understand where exactly the wild animal was hiding. One of the shadow wolves thought they were foolish creatures if they thought they had time to argue. The shadow wolf thought that humans were taking too much liberty if they could use their precious time like that. The boy realized that the wolf had such a high intelligence that he could not only speak, but also understand their speech. This was quite surprising, but quite expected from a wild magical creature. Isagi assumed that the wolf might just be playing with them. If the wolf wasn't going to attack, then the boy still had a chance to come to an agreement. Isagi had an idea that would allow them to avoid even using force. Isagi shouts that he wants to make a deal with the wolf. Mercia was shocked by such a proposal. The girl did not expect that the master would take such a risk, approaching the wolf with some kind of deal, knowing that he could be defeated. The wolf was also surprised and asked again whether the man really wanted to make a deal with them, the monsters. No one had ever dared to do that. And then, an unusually brave man decided to take the first step towards the wild beast. The guy confirms and says that the conversation will be short and profitable. The wolf comes down to him. He is clearly interested in this proposal, and he lets the guy try to speak. His mouth approaches the guy. He says in a terrifying voice that if he gets bored, he will be forced to defeat Isagi. It couldn't help but be frightening, but at a time like this, you simply can't give up. The guy clutched the glove in his hands even tighter. He asks the wolf if they ate the watermelons that grew on his farm last night. The wolf has now learned that the fruit is called watermelons. He intends to go down and eat tonight, too. The guy said that if the wolf continues to eat watermelons, there will be no more of them. However, the wolf intends to find others if this happens. The wolf is confident that such fruits and berries will definitely be replaced. The guy threw up his hands and said that, unfortunately, only they know how to grow these watermelons. All the wolves that were around the guys were shocked by this news, and the wolf himself, who was conducting the negotiations, did not expect to hear this. The wolf got angry and asked what the boy was going to demand in that case. He thought that Isagi wanted the wolves to leave if the watermelons disappeared. The wolf was wary because their food source could disappear so easily. The guy says that this is not true at all. He is going to provide watermelons and other grown vegetables and fruits to the wolves. But in return, he will also demand something here. The wolves were interested. It seemed that they really liked the watermelons, since they were still listening to the guy and all his conditions so calmly and meekly. In return, Isagi wants the wolves to guard his farm. The wolf became furious and started shouting that the boy was going to treat them like guard dogs. The wolf did not expect such treatment towards himself and his pack. He did not approve of such a condition from the boy. The wolf got into a fighting stance, as if he was about to pounce. Mercia felt like things weren't going as planned, and she was incredibly worried about her master. After all, one wrong word, and they would no longer be able to return to their village farm. However, Isagi explained that it depends on how the wolf looks at it. The guy explains that from a wolf's point of view, they can be seen as livestock that continue to produce tasty food. All the guy's judgments were absolutely logical and were based on the wolf's statement. The wolf was amazed by such a way of thinking. The guy explained that on his farm, besides watermelons, there was a lot of other tasty food. At this point, the wolves had already calmed down and seemed to be fully interested in the deal. The boy asks the result of the wolf's decision. The wild animals were full of determination. They wanted to have a permanent place where they could feed. A dark night fell. At this time, the farm is fully prepared for the defense of the farm. The guys stand with weapons and farm cleaning equipment on its border. They are determined to protect the farm. Suddenly, Nea sees a small source of light in the distance. The boys realize that it was Mercia and Isagi who had returned. They were glad that the boys had returned safe and sound, since they had been gone for quite a while. The boy asked you to forgive them for being so late. The golem's horse broke down and they had to go without it. They still managed to reach the village safely. Mercia chose to remain silent. Nea was worried that the boys might be injured. The guy said that, fortunately, everything worked out. Everyone was happy that those who came were alive and well. The guys were also worried about the well-being of Isagi and Mercia. The girl wonders if the boys were able to tame the black wolves. In fact, the guy hesitated a bit and asked the guys to listen to him calmly. But suddenly, before he could even begin his speech, someone already asked if they could go out. The guy ordered to remain silent because he was just about to explain everything to the guys. This moment turned out to be very exciting because not everyone is able to understand the whole essence of cooperation between an ordinary person and a wild animal. A black ear appeared near the guy's boot. A few seconds later, a large shadow wolf head emerged. The guys who remained guarding the farm were terrified. No one expected to see the monster so close. The boys screamed that there was a monster hiding in Isagi's shadow. Isagi extended his hand and asked the boys to calm down. After all, they needed time to at least hear the information from the guy and comprehend it, so as not to be so scared of the guests. Some time ago in the forest, a wolf offered to make a deal with the guy. However, the wolf said that if the boy could not satisfy the wolf's hunger, the deal would be over immediately. Isagi still agreed. The guy is confident that his farm is not inferior to any other in terms of productivity or taste. The wolf was very happy with this confidence. Now he can be sure that his pack will have a constant source of food. Ragment had not expected such an outstanding individual to be near the village. Ricardo thought it was kind that the boy offered such a terrible monster a deal. Not everyone was capable of such generosity. Isagi thinks that at least there is no need to worry about attacks anymore. It is possible to return to work calmly. The guys understood everything and did not object. After all, this is done for the good of the farm and its workers. And suddenly a voice comes from the shadows of the guy, asking if it is finally possible to get out. Isagi gives permission, and in an instant, a shadow monster appears from his shadow. The monster shakes off its fur. The guy immediately suggests that they discuss the duties again. This is an important part, because now all the conditions will be discussed in front of all the employees, so that everyone is aware of what is happening. Isagi says that the wolf's duty is to protect the farm, mostly at night. The wolf sees no problem with this and asks for fruits and vegetables in return. The deal is simple enough, but there are some more rules to be made. The guy thought about the volume of the harvest. Here, Mercia asked to leave this matter to her. The girl is completely confident that she is able to convey information to the wolf briefly and clearly, and convince him to agree to the deal. The girl said that they would feed the one who guarded the village every day until he was full. In addition, every 5 days they would provide enough food for the entire pack to eat. The wolf thought it was a good deal, and agreed anyway. He wondered how much people had advanced in agriculture if they could provide a large amount of food every 5 days. In this case, the guy decided to discuss the rules in general. The wolf did not think that in addition to duties there would also be rules. The guy explained that this was an agreement to comfortably exist together. The wolf began to listen patiently. The guy demands not to attack people, not to break things, not to touch the farm's harvest without permission, not to spoil things. And also to save other workers from other monsters. The wolf stamped his paw and stopped the boy's speech. He said that their duty is only to protect the farm, and he does not care about other people. The mood of the wolf is very changeable, which is typical for a wild animal. Isagi said that it's not like that at all. If there are no workers, then the crops won't grow, so he wants the wolf to think of them as part of the farm. That would be the most logical explanation for the reason to protect the other workers too. The wolf admits that there is some truth in the boy's words. However, he cannot promise that he can protect everyone. Although he is a strong beast, he is far from omnipotent. Even physical strength, agility, and dexterity have their limits. Still, this is enough for Isagi. The wolf hissed in displeasure. He bent down to the ground and told his pack about the business. He ordered the other members of the pack to come out to discuss the details of the deal one last time and get to work. Here, from the shadow of the chief wolf, other wolves climbed out. They sat down in front of him and listened to his order. All the wolves were quite satisfied with the leader's order and had no objections to the terms of the deal. The wolf ordered to follow the rules and fulfill the duties. The guy noticed that moving through the shadow was a very convenient ability. Quite quickly and easily, literally everything that a strong and agile beast needs. Mercia thinks about going to the village and explaining the situation to her father and the villagers. The boy politely asked her to do so. All that's left is to tell the others the news, and then they can get to work. The wolf called Isagi. He asked if, since they were heading to the village right now, the wolves could expect watermelons. A perfectly logical statement, given all the terms of the deal that had been set by both parties. The guy nevertheless agreed and said that he would lead the wolves to the watermelon field right now. Isagi carefully selected each watermelon to ensure that the fruit was sweet. He asked to wait just a little while before cutting the fruit. Since the wolves began to guard the plantation, peace reigned there. Now the inhabitants no longer have to worry about someone attacking their farm and ruining the harvest, and the wolves no longer have to worry about where they can get food. Almost 30 black wolves were accepted into the guard. The previous damage caused by deer and boars was compensated. The cubs often played on the farm, and Mercia asked them to stop with a smile. Mercia and the leader of the wolves walked through the city. Kokuro noticed how the wolves of the pack were basking in the way roads stroked their heads. The wolf could not understand how it all came to this. After all, such formidable and at first glance stern animals immediately became obedient. The wolf believes that they, demons, live in peace with nature. Therefore, the main thing is that people do not mind their presence. Mercia smiled. It was funny for her to listen to the wolf's objections about the essence of their existence with people. Thanks to the wolf, Isagi can spend more time on research. He has more opportunities to devote himself to science and breeding new varieties of fruits and vegetables. After all, now he does not have to worry about protecting the farm. He went down to the basement of the house with a notebook in his hands. The basement turned out to be a storage room. There were various dried herbs, fresh greens, and even ore stored there. It seems that all this was simply necessary in order to study everything calmly. Isagi wanted to improve the harvest. To do this, he built this underground experimental farm. First of all, he needs to collect data right now. He will use this data for his further research. Isagi has a light reproduction in his underground farm using a magical tool that accumulates sunlight. It is thanks to this tool that the boy does not have to worry about lighting the laboratory. Unfinished crops can grow in unplanned ways. The underground experimental farm grows crops that are being experimented on. Okra turned out to be unstable, both in its growth and nutritional value. Broccoli absorbs too many nutrients and destroys the soil. Thus, the guy realized that these types of crops are not yet ready to be grown on the farm. Isagi is going to go further. He called Mercia to make sure she was not around. After all, he did not want the girl to know what he was preparing for her. This was a very important matter. The guy touched the wall with his palm, and it immediately seemed to dissolve. In the room, heavy-looking bunches of grapes with carved leaves hung from the ceiling. Each berry shone like a mother-of-pearl bead and reflected the rays of light. The grapes looked very good, as if an artist had painted an oil painting. The guy was curious about what it tasted like. The grapes tasted incredibly sour. It is not always possible to grow the perfect crop in a short time. Sometimes it takes several weeks. The seeds are of different sizes and are quite difficult to eat. The boy knew that it was very difficult to find a balance between fertility and taste. Isagi even began to think about abandoning mass production. But then Isagi suddenly remembers the interested face of Mercia during the conversation about grapes. He understands that he cannot stop and must continue trying, at least so that he can thank the girl for all her efforts. The guy understands that Mercia has done too much for them. In gratitude, he must give her the most delicious grapes. The guy clearly understands that the chosen culture can implement his idea as intended. Suddenly, Isagi heard someone's voice in the laboratory. He ran out in an instant, and the wall behind him immediately became completely ordinary in appearance. Isagi peeked out from behind the plant stand and saw Mercia, who knew for sure that the gentleman was in the basement. She couldn't help but know where the guy was and what he was doing. They had known each other for too long. Mercia turned to Isagi with an unkind look and said that he had been working too much lately. The girl noticed that the guy had been in the workshop for the last 2 weeks. As it turns out, the guy doesn't notice at all how quickly time flies. Mercia exhaled, her gaze turning pitying. The girl said that if the guy continued in the same spirit, he might get sick. Isagi thought about taking a day off, but the guy has no idea what to do on weekends. It seems that Isagi has not had a rest for a long time, or has not done it at all, so here too he will need Mercia's help. Mercia continued to go on a picnic. After all, the weather was nice today, and there was a beautiful flower garden nearby where she could have a good time. The girl's knowledge was always very useful in such matters. The guy really liked the idea. He suggested that in that case they should start cooking already in order to have time to go on a picnic today. As it turned out, Mercia had already prepared everything. She showed the basket of food to the gentleman. Isagi thought it was great. He thought he should invite other employees. But it turns out that Mercia has already done that. The other guys will join when they finish their work. The guy thanked the girl for coordinating their actions. Suddenly, as the guy closed the door behind him and went outside, the shadow wolf's face crawled out of his shadow. He always appears very unexpectedly, and sometimes even scares those who are standing nearby. The boy wondered when the wolf managed to stand in his shadow, and this time the boy could not help but be scared by the appearance of the beast so close. The wolf said that as a farm employee, he also wanted to take part in the picnic. The boy was surprised that the wolf, Gakuro, was also interested in the picnic. In response to this, the wolf only looked away. He clearly expressed his desire to go on a picnic with the boys and did not want to explain anything else. The sun is shining brightly outside. Mercia, Isagi, and Kokuro went on a picnic. They walked through the city, through the forest and meadows, and eventually reached a flower garden. They were surrounded by a large expanse of the places they had to walk through. The boy was amazed at how beautiful the view was when he entered the garden. The vast fields of flowers were simply immaculate. A lone tree was dropping petals of flowers on the boys. The girl said that they had already arrived. There were so many flowers that it was impossible to list all their types. As it turned out, the guy did not know at all that there was such a beautiful garden near the village. There were a huge number of flowers in the garden, which only complemented all the beauty. Isagi began to carefully examine the flowers. The girl carefully and calmly watched him. She was glad that the gentleman was finally able to take a day off and just spend time for pleasure. The young man didn't even know that there was such a beautiful garden near the village. The guy was interested in the names of certain flowers. Mercia knew the names of literally all the flowers that grew in this garden. She said the name of each flower that the guy was interested in, with some pride. Isagi found it interesting that the girl knew so many flowers, since he himself only knew what they were made of. This was not quite enough to simply enjoy such a nice day in a great environment. The guy asked the girl if he could pick some of these flowers. Mercia allowed it. However, it was not very clear why the guy needed them right now. The guy uses magic, and the petals turn into a flower of a different color. Mercia immediately noticed that the Hansanya petals had turned blue, although just a couple of seconds ago, they had been pure white. The guy explained that he alchemically changed the elemental gradients in the flower. He hands the altered flower to the girl, saying that he is giving it to her. Now it is clear why the guy needed the flower from the garden. Mercia did not expect such a gift and was embarrassed by it. The boy stood for some time with the flower stretched out. The wolf did not care so much that he fell asleep in the sweet-smelling flowers. The guy came to a realization. He apologized and thought about how he hadn't meant to give Mercia flowers out of the blue. It seemed reckless and stupid to him, and he hadn't wanted to show Mercia that way. Here the boy's hand with the flower goes down. Isagi thought that he might be annoying the girl. He was sad to realize this, because Mercia does a lot for him, and she can't always find time for herself because of this. Here Mercia suddenly took the flower from the boy's hands. She said that the boy did not irritate her at all. She was incredibly pleased to receive such a sudden gift from Isagi. Even if there was no reason for it, the situation itself could not but please. The girl does not think about the fact that the guy knows about one thing. In fact, Mercia was surprised, because there is a special meaning in the gift of Hansan to the opposite sex. The guy was surprised by this, because he did not know what it was about. He asked what the meaning of this gesture was. The girl turned away, smiling softly, and said that it was a secret. She covered her mouth with her index finger as a sign that it was indeed a secret thing. Isagi is a little scared by this and asks for the flower back. However, Mercia refuses and says that the flower is now hers, because it was Isagi who gave it to her. She turned away and listened to the enchanting scent of the flower. Such a touching and sensual moment was interrupted by the wolf, who woke up from a deep sleep. Kokuro was hungry and suggested that they start eating already. After all, they had come to the garden relatively long ago, and the table was still not set. The boys spread a blanket under the tree. Mercia opened the basket and said that they had sandwiches today. The girl did her best to make sure that Isagi did not worry about the picnic. Once Isagi and Kokuro saw what was in the basket, they were shocked. The basket contains a huge number of sandwiches of different flavors and types. The wolf became even hungrier and asked to quickly give him his share. The guy smiled and said that he would cut a piece for him right now. The sandwich was cut in half, and every single layer of food was visible in the cross-section. The boys devoured the delicious sandwiches with gusto. Juicy and thick ham, crisp lettuce, tomatoes, sweet as fruit, with the right sourness made an incredible impression. The guy was shocked by how delicious the vegetables were growing on their farm. Mercia also noted that the vegetables improved by the gentleman had a special taste. It is impossible not to notice that these facts complement each other well. Isagi stared at Mercia's sandwich. He noticed the thick tomatoes and the same cabbage and assumed that it was incredibly delicious. Kokuro didn't care at all about the combination. The wolf asked if the boys had ready-made watermelon sandwiches. Isagi doesn't understand how anyone can eat watermelon sandwiches. He thinks that this type of crop should be eaten just like that. Isagi thinks that this is a very strange combination. As it turns out, there are watermelon sandwiches too, and Mercia took the trouble to make them. The guys had sweet watermelon and yogurt sandwiches, and there's also the classic salted watermelon and cheese salad. Surprisingly, it sounded very tasty. Mercia asked if Mr. Isagi wanted to try some of these sandwiches. The guy would really like to, and the wolf was already gobbling up treats with his favorite watermelon. The guy tried the sandwich. He noticed that the refreshing sweetness of the watermelon and the sourness of the yogurt went well together. Now he realized that watermelon can actually be delicious even in sandwiches. Isagi has never been a fan of the capital's cloying sweets, but this watermelon sandwich has a pleasant, sweet, salty taste. Mercia's efforts were definitely not in vain. She can cook absolutely any fruit deliciously. The boy thanked Mercia for the treat and said that it was very tasty. The wolf was already asleep, licking his lips after the meal. Kokoro noted that it was only delicious because of the watermelon. Isagi said that only Mercia can make watermelon so delicious. It is simply impossible to come up with a better combination. The girl was very pleased to hear these words. The guy started on his second sandwich with a classic taste. The girl watched him with a smile. The boys were relaxing under the tree without a care. They were very happy that they could relax so peacefully at that moment. Suddenly, a girl in the field waves her hand, saying that their friends have already started eating. The other workers have already finished the tasks that Mercia assigned them, and they also hurried to rest. As it turned out, it was Nea and all the other guys. They were also all incredibly hungry after work, and were heading over to join Isagi and Mercia. They all really wanted to try the sandwiches Mercia had made. The boy was glad that the boys had already finished all the work. However, the same could not be said about Mercia. She believed that the boys should have been given much more work. The girl simply wanted to spend a little more time with the master. The guy asked the girl what she was talking about. She immediately smiled and said that there was nothing wrong, and suggested that they spread out more. All the guys joined the vacationers. They were incredibly happy that they all had such a day off. Konya says good morning. This girl is from a wonderful chamber of commerce. Everyone else says good morning in return. She is always friendly to other people, traders, and customers, and is always a pleasure to work with. Isagi noticed that the girl was buying the harvest as usual. Koni confirmed this and thanked the boy. The boy pointed and said that this was their harvest. They had collected quite a large amount of harvest this time. Konya saw a huge number of boxes and barrels of goods. She was extremely happy about this and thanked Isagi. Now the girl has even more material to sell at the markets. Konya gave the command to her boys to start work. All the carts began to be loaded with goods right up to the top. Suddenly, the girl's face changed. Isagi, noticing this, asked her what had happened. Konya heard in a letter from Mercia that the guards were demons. The guy confirmed it. Isagi explained that they were shadow and black wolves. The guy asked if they needed to be called, and the girl did not refuse. Isagi waved his hand at one of the shadow wolves to come closer. Konya was very happy to see such a cute creature, but you have to remember that wild animals are always very unpredictable. Konya asked if she could touch one wolf. The guy explained that if the wolf allowed it, then everything would be fine. However, as soon as the girl reached her hands to the top of the wolf's head, the hat immediately flew off her head. The wolf with the hat in his mouth instantly jumped far away from the girl. He looked at her slyly, holding the hat in his teeth. He found himself a new toy, and he was clearly not going to give it up so easily. The girl grabbed her head because it was her favorite hat. She rushed at the wolf with great speed, screaming for him to give it back. The wolf himself did not expect such speed from the girl, but he still did not plan to give up. The girl, not having time to reach the wolf, fell face down on the ground. Later she asked where the black wolf suddenly disappeared to, and from the shadow of the guy, a voice is heard that the wolf will not let itself be captured so easily. Kokuro appears from the shadow of the boy and apologizes to the girl. He holds her hat in his teeth. Konya suddenly jumps on the wolf, screaming that she finally caught him. The girl clutches the animal's thick fur with her hands. Kokuro couldn't move, and Konya just screamed at him to give him the hat. The wolf still agreed to the condition, only if the girl stopped screaming in his ear. Suddenly, Isagi asked Konya if they could increase the volume of trade, about 1.5 times the current level. Konya thought it was a good offer. However, given the number of carts and the allocated areas, it is difficult to do now. The girl guessed that the guy now has a surplus of harvest. They have grown so many fruits and vegetables that now there is nowhere to put them. Then she suggested that they go to the city to sell the excess vegetables and fruits. The boy heard about it for the first time. Konya explained that there was a city called Milen, which was only a day's journey away. Isagi remembered that this was the city where he and Mercia had stopped on their way to the village. Milen is the nearest town to this village, and quite a lively one. If the guys go to the free market and pay for a place, they will be able to trade freely. This way, Isagi can sell her fruits. The girl is sure that if it is the harvest from Isagi's farm, then the fruits and vegetables will sell well. After all, the quality of his harvest always remains high. Mercia was surprised to hear this news, because the guy was going to try to sell the fruits from his stock. The girl found this idea very good. She was just thinking about buying some more goods for the house. However, Nea also wanted to go to the city and asked to be taken along. Mercia asked why the girl also wanted to go. In fact, the girl wanted everyone to know how delicious the harvest was on their farm. And only she could do such advertising. The guy asked the girl with a smile what the real reason was for going to the city. Nea explained that she worked very hard, so she wanted to go to the city at least sometimes to have fun. A second later, the girl realized what she had said. Isagi set her up. The guy realized that the girl had told him her true intentions. Maybe she really wanted to make a quality advertisement for Isagi's harvest, but that was not the primary goal. Mercia explained that they were not going there for fun. They were going for business. However, Nea said that it didn't matter. She just wanted to get out of the village. In the end, both girls stared at the guy, waiting for him to make a final decision. The guy allowed Nea to go too. The girl immediately ran away to pack her things. Mercia suggested that Isagi took the girl on the trip because they were childhood friends. However, the guy did not agree and said that he and Mercia would be busy with sales, and Nea would be serving customers. Mercia agreed. She was going to do her best and let Naya take care of the customers. Naya ran out to the guys and got ready for the trip. She was wearing a cropped shirt and shorts. Mercia noticed that the girl had changed. Naya explained that these clothes were for going out into the city. She was full of enthusiasm for going to the city. It seemed that she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Naya asked Mercia slyly why she didn't wear something pretty for a change. Mercia explained that she was working and simply didn't have time for it, no matter how much she wanted to. Naya said that it was rather boring. In fact, she would like to see Mercia in nicer clothes more often. Surely the girl is very beautiful outside of work, but she just doesn't have enough time for it. Mercia asked Isagi to hurry. After all, if they left now, they would just have time to return by nightfall. Isagi nevertheless agreed. The guy reported that with the help of the golem horses, they would be able to reach the necessary place in 3 hours. Mercia immediately remembered the last ride on golem horses with the guy. The girl immediately blushed and tried to hide it with her palm. Memories of how the girl had to ride, pressed tightly against the guy, immediately started running through her head. As it turned out, there were 3 horses, just enough for everyone. Isagi had enough materials to create ways for everyone to move faster and save time. Nea was very happy that she got a golem too. As it turned out, the guy had recently received completely new materials, including copper, which was needed to build a golem. Isagi was very happy that everything had happened so conveniently. Isagi noticed Mercia's bad mood and asked her what had happened. Mercia was depressed to the point of ugliness, because she thought that she would again ride with the guy on the same horse, and they would again be able to be closer to each other. Mercia, without changing her expression, mounted her horse and called for preparations for departure. The boy assumed that Mercia did not like the appearance of the horse. It was sometimes very difficult for Isagi to read the girl's true emotions. The boys set off. They galloped quickly across the endless fields. Nea was terribly happy that they took her along, and even provided her with a personal horse. Now the girl can fully enjoy the freedom that she has long wanted. Nea shouted that she finally saw the city. Isagi was very happy about this news. The guys could already see the tops of the houses, which were visible from behind the strong and reliable wall. The boys enter the city through a large arch, along with a large stream of other people. Mercia skillfully jumped off her horse to continue on foot. They walked quite a long way. The boys walked through the city. There were simply a huge number of people and other magical creatures on the streets. Nea was interested in almost every inhabitant of the city. Isagi came to the conclusion that the city of Milan was really very big. The boys stood on the way to the large arches that seemed to lead to the center of the city. The boys also saw simply countless merchants who had arrived in the city to sell their goods. Nea assumed that the guys were in this city for the first time. However, Isagi said that he had already been to Milan. But last time the guy did not have time to see the sights. He was on business and simply changed maps. Nea was very happy that today the boys could take their time and properly look around. Isagi nevertheless agreed with this. Now they could look around the city and properly engage in trade. But first, the boys need to sell their supplies and earn money. Nea really wanted to help Isagi and Mercia in this matter. Suddenly, Mercia and Isagi froze, noticing one thing among the people. Mercia froze in place when she saw the beautiful jewelry behind the glass display cases. The precious stones shimmered brightly in the sun, as if beckoning with their brilliance, and the chains on which they hung gave a feeling of lightness and elegance. Isagi thought and remembered the moment when the girl was very interested in one thing. Then he asked Mercia if she liked that item, but she started to refuse and say that it was not so at all. The guy understands what interests Mercia and that the girl hides her emotions very poorly. Isagi decides to give the girl something after work. He really wants to make a pleasant surprise for Mercia. The guys arrived at the market. There were just a huge number of tents with all sorts of goods. If the guy pays for the chosen place, he can put up a tent there, which is what he actually did. Now they need to lay out the goods. Isagi was proud of the way he had arranged the goods. There were boxes of vegetables and fruits on the shelves, but Nea was not at all impressed by this appearance. She thought that the fruits and vegetables should look more beautiful. The girl found the appearance of the counter not at all attractive. Mercia and Isagi thought that they already had everything extremely simple and their fruits were very tasty. They thought that it really showed on the counter. Nea sighed with displeasure. She hoped that the boys understood that the buyers had no idea how delicious the fruits and vegetables growing on their farm were. Nea tried to convey this idea to the boys as clearly as possible. Mercia and Isagi were amazed. It was as if this idea had just dawned on them. It seemed that they had not guessed about it before. NEA began to explain what needed to be done to fix the situation on the counter. The girl carefully examined the boxes of fruits and vegetables. Nea suggested offering not only the fruits themselves, but also fruit juice. It was good that Isagi had a blender with him. NEA thought it would be a good idea to serve the food in pretty containers. As it turned out, Mercia had a lot of grape baskets from the village. They would be great for enhancing the presentation. Nea now decided to take some fruits and put them together. Mercia and Isagi watched with interest to see what the girl would come up with. Nea collected the fruit assortment in a basket, which cost 3 silver coins. This composition looked simply superb. Such a basket would be an ideal gift or souvenir. Nea looked proudly at her work and waited for buyers. The guy wondered if it would be bought.